Chapter 858. Harboring a stray thought, Li Qingshan closed his eyes and slowly sank into the hot spring. Even the scorching hot spring water could not cover the warmth of the delicate body in his arms. A warm current surged in his heart, far surpassing that insignificant little desire. Sleeping with their necks intertwined, time seemed to freeze at this moment, and they were indeed looking forward to it. Until a sudden clap of thunder passed through the thick earth and rocks, Li Qingshan suddenly opened his eyes. This was no ordinary thunder, but someone was going through a tribulation. The thunder contained the power of heaven, and he reckoned that it was the second tribulation. Could it be Ru Xen? Let's go out and take a look. With a splash, Li Qingshan carried little N and jumped out of the spring. With one hand, he picked up the clothes on the ground, and with the other, he lifted her long hair. Without the long hair and water covering her, her beautiful figure was fully revealed. Li Qingshan's breath paused for a moment, and he did not shy away from admiring her for a while before continuing to dress her. Little N stretched her arms and put her hands into her sleeves, enjoying his care. The moment Li Qingshan helped her put on her clothes and fastened her belt, he actually felt a hint of reluctance. It was like covering a pearl with a piece of cloth, covering up this alluring beauty. However, when he thought about it again, the pearl belonged to him, so he came to an understanding. And shoes. Little N lifted her slender feet and shook them, a smile on her face. You really know how to enjoy yourself. Li Qingshan squatted down and held one of her slender feet. They were so full that they could not bear to be held in one hand, and the light pink cardamom dot on her feet was unexpectedly beautiful. He could not help but play with it, and a bell-like laughter rang in his ears. He then helped her put on her shoes and socks. This should be fine, right? Li Qingshan was about to put on his clothes, but little N stopped him, and said with a smile, I'll let you enjoy yourself too. Instead, she turned around and began to serve him, but her actions were indescribably gentle and delicate, tidying up his clothes meticulously. Looking at her serious expression, Li Qingshan also felt at peace. While putting on his shoes, she secretly tickled the soles of his feet. Before he could laugh, she laughed first. When they returned to Ba Huang Palace, little N did not follow Li Qingshan out to watch the heavenly tribulation. Instead, he stayed behind to cultivate. Li Qingshan had already sensed that the person undergoing the tribulation was not Ru Xian. He went out to take a look, but it was the matriarch of a certain clan of night roamers. After so many years of arduous cultivation, she had finally made it to this step. Bolts of heavenly lightning shuttled through the void and bombarded a dark shadow. Although the process was rather thrilling, with the advantage of being a mutant and the many years of accumulation, he managed to survive the second heavenly tribulation without any mishaps. As a result, Li Qingshan gave her a dwelling on the main peak of Savage Mountain, as well as some pills. With Yi Mingzhu as an example, the mistress was very respectful. After thanking Li Qingshan for his reward, she returned to her cave abode to recuperate. Looks like I'll still need some time. Li Qingshan glanced at Ru Xian's dwelling. He did not disturb her. He gave some instructions to Yi Liusu before returning to the Ba Huang Palace. Several months later, the myriad poison ancestor arrived before the Ba Huang Palace and reported to Li Qingshan. Ru Xian's plan to refine viruses had already reached a certain level, but she still needed to undergo the second heavenly tribulation and raise her plague ghost to another realm before she could actually carry it out. As a result, she entered secluded cultivation. She told me to pass this bottle of medicine to the king. The myriad poison ancestor offered up a small jade bottle. What's the medicine in here made of? Li Qingshan held the small jade bottle. It was all thanks to Ru Xian's medicine that balanced water and fire that he could comprehend the second innate ability of the phoenix at a critical moment this time. Otherwise, he would have taken a very long time to be reborn, and he would not have been able to merge with the demon heart. There are many materials used in this medicine. They're not particularly precious, but in my opinion, the most important ingredient is her heart blood. Heart blood. Li Qingshan seemed surprised, but he also seemed to understand. The heart blood the myriad poison ancestor mentioned obviously did not mean she had spent her heart blood, nor was it simply the blood of her heart. The heart was the dwelling of the soul, the master of the blood, the master of the meridians. It was extremely important to cultivators. Heart blood was also known as essence blood. During critical moments in battle, they would often bite the tip of their tongue and spray a mouthful of essence blood onto an arcane treasure or arcane artifact, which would greatly increase their power and turn the tables. However, it would also take quite a lot of damage to their cultivation. It could even lead to death. If he had guessed correctly, her talent was even greater than regular other folks, and she practiced a supreme cultivation method like the heavenly tome of cloud furnace, yet she still could not undergo the tribulation until now. Li Qingshan could not help but sigh inside. Although I've provided her with a lot of assistance in her cultivation, I've also dragged down her cultivation before I knew it. She clearly harbors a deep grievance that she can't let go of, but she'd rather fall out with me than let me take the risk with her. Why must she do this? After getting the myriad poison ancestor to continue practicing the scripture of the poison-assimilating ghost king, Li Qingshan returned to the hall. The samadhi flames of white bone that were as transparent as glass basically filled the entire hall. There were twisted faces of bone-eating shamans in there, but at a closer glance, there were only transparent, white flames. It seemed like it was all an illusion. Little Anne sat in the flames. Her flesh and blood had become transparent too, almost to the point of nothingness. A set of shiny, white bones was clearly visible. Skeleton demons danced around him, clanging their teeth together like they were singing a terrifying ballad, but it was vaguely filled with zen. A dragon's cry swam through the flames. Clearly, Little Anne had also integrated the chant of Devanaga into her cultivation of the path of white bone and great beauty. Li Qingshan stared at her for a very long time before shrugging helplessly in the end. He sat down and watched over her. It was said that the sight of great beauty reduced to white bones could make ordinary people understand that beneath the beautiful skin was terrifying white bones, and that all forms of beauty were nothing but an illusion. Unfortunately, when he looked at her white bones, he felt a sense of familiarity and fondness from the bottom of his heart. He did not feel any fear at all. He felt like every single bone gave off a different sense of beauty. It had to be mentioned that his sense of beauty had always been very problematic. He had always felt like his original form as a demon was even more domineering and cool than the handsome North Moon or the robust Li Qingshan. He was tempted to maintain his original form as a demon and run around the land, between the mountains, naked. He had thought about it seriously before. Once he no longer had to hide his identity and settle all his grievances, he would set off from the coast of the South Sea, pass through the 9 provinces, and rush to the Frost Province. Ha! Everyone in the world will be dumbfounded if that happens. Am I a freak? No, rather than calling it a freak, you might as well call it a feeling of realizing myself. Don't tell me I'm a freak. Forget it, I don't care what it is, as long as it's me. Li Qingshan agreed with Cheong Qi in some aspects. Calculating the pros and cons with pure rationality and constantly seeking advantages and avoiding disadvantages would certainly lead to long-term success. But if everyone did the same, then what difference would there be between him and others? Punishing evil and promoting good would also allow him to receive kindness from kind-hearted people and obtain a good reputation, forming a real trend. But what could he get by punishing good and promoting evil? Since evil people were evil people, they certainly did not know how to repay kindness. This was completely a kind of behaviorism without the slightest benefit. It was just to satisfy one's interests and challenge the conventions. It was simply like a naughty and willful child, but it contained a free and unrestrained self. In the water margin that he had read in his previous life, the opening chapter named the true nature of the 108 heroes, the 108 heavenly spirits and earthly fiends suppressed in the demon-subduing hall. Among them, there were those who killed people and ate their hearts, and there were also those who used violence to fight violence. They seemed to be very different, but there was no difference in essence. Whether it was good or evil, the wanton acts that had transcended rationality were just the word demon. The reason why it could be passed down and praised by the people was because it portrayed the demonic nature in great detail. It allowed people to bring a hero into the book to do things that they normally couldn't do and didn't dare to do. They could say that they were happy. The demonic and divine, in the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine, are not just good and evil. The spirit turtle focuses on longevity and does not get involved in right and wrong, while the phoenix cherishes its feathers. Even if it doesn't do evil intentionally, it won't have the heroic spirit to stand up for injustice. Various thoughts flashed through Li Qingshan's head. He gained a deeper understanding of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine. At the same time, Ru Xin removed all her clothes and sat in the jade melting cauldron. Her entire body shone with the luster of jade. After ingesting a precious 10-year virtue accumulation pill, she powered the jade melting cauldron and refined herself like a pill. Then she used the heavenly tome of cloud furnace to form a cloud furnace in her body to refine the virtue accumulation pill. Alchemy focused on fire and water complementing each other. The jade melting cauldron spewed out water and fire. With a twist of her hands, she drew the water and fire into her palms. They actually fused together in a wondrous manner, turning into a cloud of fire that gradually spread over and swallowed her body. The power of water and fire actually surged out from the cloud furnace in her body as well, and it was much purer than the water and fire from the jade melting cauldron. They fused together naturally, rapidly refining the virtue accumulation pill. Let alone regular cultivators, even if they could not do it like this. The violent effects of the pill immediately filled her limbs and bones. Even her body, which had turned into tough jade, almost exploded from the overload. There was no doubt that such a method of cultivation would require great pain. However, it was as if she had truly become an unconscious jade. Her expression did not change at all, and only her eyelashes trembled slightly. She was multitasking, controlling the jade melting cauldron to suppress the effects of the pill from the outside. At the same time, she used the heavenly tome of cloud furnace to refine her body while refining the virtue accumulation pill. At the same time, she had to balance the power of water and fire inside her body. She did not hesitate to push the speed of her cultivation to the extreme. If she was not careful, there would be the danger of the cauldron exploding. If that happened, it would not only be the jade melting cauldron that would explode, but the cloud furnace in her body would also explode. This was not because she was in a hurry to break through the second heavenly tribulation, but because she had to take a risk to cultivate the heavenly tome of cloud furnace. The history of the 9 states was vast. The heavenly tome of cloud furnace was not the only high-level cultivation method that had been passed down from beyond the heavens. The reason why it had not been passed down was that cultivators treated it like a treasure and refused to pass it on to others. It was also because the difficulty of cultivating it was not just ordinarily high, but also because the requirements for talent were not just ordinarily high. Even if one's talent was lucky enough to meet the requirements and overcome all difficulties, it was still extremely risky. It was unknown how many geniuses had died on this path. She did not know if Chu Tian had noticed something when she was saving him, but the heavenly tome of cloud furnace was extremely compatible with her. Her progress in cultivation was very fast. Of course, it was also thanks to the vast amount of resources that Li Qingshan had provided. Just the 10-year virtue accumulation pill that she had obtained from the 10,000 poison order was something that could only be encountered by chance. There was no time in the cave. The sun and moon shuttled back and forth, and time flew by. She did not know how much time had passed. A thunderous sound came from the distant horizon. She opened her eyes. Chapter 859. Over 18,000 kilometers to the south of the coast of the South Sea was a large, spacious island. It was long and neat, shaped like a huge ship on the sea. It was called Giant Ship Island. 3 mountains stood parallel to each other on the island, with a large center and 2 smaller sides, like the sails of a huge ship. They were called Major Cloud Mast Mountain, Major Cloud-Massed Mountain, and Minor Cloud-Massed Mountain. There were thousands of palaces on the three mountains, possessing the unique architectural style of the South Sea. It was grand and grand, hidden in the clouds like the residences of immortals. It was where the greatest cultivation sect of the South Sea, the Cloud-Massed sect, resided. Two long, white stone bridges that resembled rainbows pierced through the clouds, connecting the three mountains. If the sea breeze dispersed the clouds, it would be possible to overlook the thousands of households below from the bridge, the rows upon rows of houses, the long streets, and the surging people. It was filled with the atmosphere of the mortal world. People surged out of the city, gathering on an open beach to the south of the island. It was a dark mass, like ants whose nest had exploded. Who knew how many thousands of people had gathered there, raising their heads and gazing at the depths of the ocean? Groups of soldiers maintained order. There were also many cultivators hovering in the air. They did not disguise themselves at all, proudly basking in the reverence of the mortals below. It was the 8th month. Even though it was scorching in the south, the sea breeze still brought a hint of coolness. The sun gradually sank below the surface of the sea like a ring of red jade, dyeing the sky and the ocean red. The coolness grew. The sea breeze was calm. Gentle waves surged towards the shore one after another. The port was filled with ships of various sizes, ranging from longboats and huge ships to two-row dinghies. They all rose and fell with the waves. At this moment, there were even a few ships that drifted over from the sea, searching for a place to dock in a hurry. Clearly, the people gathered there were not just people from Three Sails City. They clamored with their own dialects. If they did not yell, they would not be able to hear anything, so it became even more noisy. Oh my God, why are there so many people this year? When is the Merfolk Sea Fair ever lacking people? But this is just too many. You're still too young. Shoo, I'm telling you, the Merfolk are about to fight a great battle against the fire people in the north. They've definitely brought quite a lot of stuff this year. What did you say? I can't hear you. There was a hill behind the beach that was surrounded on all sides. Mortals were not allowed to approach. There was a majestic platform on it with 81 white sails fluttering in the wind. There were many seats arranged in the middle. An old man with hair as white as snow sat in the main seat. His disciples stood to his left and right. He was the master of the Cloud Sail sect, Ji Changfeng, who was waiting there with his disciples. Ji Changfeng gazed at the depths of the sea. Although he was sitting still, he gave people a feeling that he was about to fly away. Father, it's fine if the mermaid comes. Why do you need to welcome her personally? A handsome young man beside the old man said disapprovingly. Qingyu, the Merfolk king might come this year. Ji Changfeng turned his head and was exceptionally gentle towards his talented youngest son. Merfolk king. Ji Qingyu was shocked. In the past Merfolk sea markets, it was usually the Merfolk elders who led the team. He did not expect that the Merfolk king would personally come this time. The Cloud Sail sect was one of the few large sects on the islands of the South Sea, watched over by the great cultivator known as the Wind Gale King, Ji Changfeng. They could be regarded as the leaders of the sects of the South Sea, but they were nowhere close to the royal court of the Merfolk in terms of strength. Moreover, the Cloud Sail sect was located on the South Sea alone. It was not restricted by the Great Xia Empire, so it was not protected. Even if it was destroyed, no one would care. Maintaining good relations with the Merfolk was particularly important. However, he still felt like this was far too polite. It was beneath his status as the Wind Gale King. Then just wait on Cloud Sail Mountain, father. It won't be too late to come out and receive the Merfolk King once she comes. Fellow Yi from the Sword Pavilion has also sent a message saying that she will be coming with her disciples. Ji Changfeng's gaze was deep. If it was just the Merfolk King, they could be considered acquaintances. There was no need for him to be so polite. The master of the Sword Pavilion. Ji Qingyu became even more surprised. The South Sea Sword Pavilion was located on the South Sea, but its geographical location was relatively close to the 9 provinces, and they rarely interacted with the sects of the South Sea, so they were often recognized as a sect of the Mist Province. Sword cultivators did not care about material possessions, so the Merfolk Sea Fair was not that important. Out of all the past masters of the Sword Pavilion, this Pavilion Master Yi was the first to attend the Merfolk Sea Fair. Who knew what his intentions were? Ji Changfeng continued, there's also the myriad poison ancestor of the south, the head caretaker of the king of Yu's estate, and a White Hawk commander. Ji Qingyu had already become speechless from shock. The myriad poison cult was several tens of thousand kilometers away, but the myriad poison ancestor's reputation was still very resounding. The head caretaker of the king of Yu's estate did not have a cultivation at the third heavenly tribulation, but the significance of his appearance here was no less than that of a great cultivator. The Merfolk Sea Fair was a grand event of the cultivation community of the South Sea, but to people like that, there was not a lot that caught their attention. Their transactions and interactions were all within small circles of the same level. There was no need for them to show themselves. The Merfolk Sea Fair this time seemed very different. Though, what was the deal with the White Hawk commander? He was just a second heavenly tribulation golden core cultivator. There were quite a lot of people who had come to the Merfolk Sea Fair this time. The cultivation community of the South Sea had never been fond of these lackeys of the Empire. No wonder Father is so solemn. None of these seniors can afford to slight them, but this White Hawk commander? The White Hawk commander is called Li Qingshan. He's a figure who's risen up recently in the south. He currently occupies Savage Mountain, and he's known as the King of Savages. The King of Savages? Ji Qingyu immediately wanted to laugh. Even a White Hawk commander was bold enough to call himself a king. However, only when he saw Ji Changfeng's stern expression did he stop laughing in a hurry. His name is Li Qingshan. You can't underestimate him. He comes from the Green Province in the north, and in just a few short years, he swept through the various sects of the south, using the Blood Oath scroll to forcefully gather a group of subordinates. The myriad poison cult has suffered greatly at his hands in the past. Basically all of their disciples are dead or injured, and even the myriad poison ancestor can't do anything to him. It's said that the king of Southern Yu's estate even wanted to make him an honored guest, but he turned it down, said Ji Changfeng. The king of Southern Yu's estate had also wanted to make him an honored guest in the past, but he turned it down because he did not want to become involved in the disputes of the cultivation community of the 9 provinces. However, he was unable to see through this Li Qingshan at all. Yet he's still bold enough to come. Isn't he afraid of the myriad poison ancestor? Ji Qingyu was filled with disbelief. This Li Qingshan really was something else. With his cultivation at the second heavenly tribulation, he was actually bold enough to fall out with the myriad poison ancestor, and he even came to the Merfolk Sea Fair fearlessly. Was he not afraid of death, or was he bold because of his skill? The first cave master of Savage Mountain, Yu Wufeng, was originally the first senior brother of the South Sea Sword Pavilion. He's currently trapped by the Blood Oath scroll, serving Li Qingshan as a servant. Oh right, that Li Qingshan is around the same age as you. He's not even 40 yet, and he underwent the second heavenly tribulation before the age of 30. Ji Changfeng guessed that it was very likely that the myriad poison ancestor had come this time to deal with Li Qingshan, while the master of the Sword Pavilion probably had not come for the Merfolk Sea Fair either, but to save his own disciple. Was that Li Qingshan the only reason why he was so fearless? He was underestimating great cultivators a little too much. Yi Duanhai was very stubborn. How could he be threatened so easily? By then, who knew who would be the one threatening who? However, who knew? He had heard that Yu Wufeng was already close to the third heavenly tribulation, and he wielded the arcane treasure, the Fogbow sword. The South Sea Sword Pavilion could not afford to not care about a successor like that. Ji Qingyu widened his eyes. He could be regarded as a slightly renowned genius in the cultivation community of the South Sea, but his cultivation was only at late foundation establishment. He planned on accumulating his cultivation for another decade or two before attempting the second heavenly tribulation. In comparison, the master of the fogbow sword, Yu Wufeng, was a renowned genius, yet he had actually been restrained by Li Qingshan, serving him as a servant. Just what kind of power was that? He vaguely understood what Ji Changfeng was trying to say. The waters here ran too deep. It was not something he could take part in. As long as they were mentioned, even if he was the Wind Gale King's beloved son, he could not afford to offend them. Father, I understand. Ji Qingyu was rather reluctant to accept this, but the difference in cultivation was real. Ji Changfeng glanced around the platform again. Just now, the conversation was not loud, but they did not purposefully hide it. With the sharp ears and eyes of cultivators, they could hear every single word clearly. They all became stern, lacking some of the arrogance of a master. Ji Changfeng nodded slightly, but he let out a long sigh inside. If only the Cloud Sail sect had a Li Qingshan. He could not tell who could inherit his legacy among the current disciples. At the end of the day, the 9 provinces were the foundation of this world. At the very least, it was the foundation of human cultivation. The South Sea was vast, and there were many cultivators on the scattered islands, but there were barely any who could reach his realm of cultivation. Instead, there were quite a few water demon kings in the depths of the sea. The situation was completely reversed from the 9 provinces. The forces of other folk and demons far surpassed the forces of humans. This was something that could not be avoided. Unlike the merfolk and water demons, who were born with the sea as their home, humans still had to stand on the ground at the end of the day. Without billions of people, how were there thousands of cultivators? The islands of the South Sea were vast, with many cities and even countries, but their populations were extremely limited. Often, after years of hard work, a single storm could kill millions. Cultivators could still endure a natural disaster like that, but if a demon king wanted to change up his diet, it would immediately lead to the destruction of the entire sect. Even if some demon commanders took action, there were not a lot of cultivators who could stop them. Of course, there were actually not a lot of cultivators who were so unlucky. Water demons were used to eating fish and prawns, so they might not be willing to switch to eating humans. The South Sea was far too vast, and the islands were scattered far too widely, so there were not as many conflicts. Regular cultivators could live in relatively peace. They could just casually occupy an island and cultivate. Being self-sufficient was not difficult, so there were a lot of hidden cultivators and independent cultivators. However, they faced another problem. The resources were far too limited, and communication was far too lacking. As a result, the development of the cultivation community could not compare to the 9 provinces. The South Sea Sword Pavilion had always maintained a connection with the Mist Province, constantly fighting against the myriad poison cult. It seemed like a pointless loss, but the legacies of every single master of the Sword Pavilion had never been severed. As Ji Changfeng pondered, the last ray of light was about to disperse. Suddenly, he thought of something and stood up, casting his gaze into the depths of the ocean. Chapter 861. The winds suddenly began to surge, and the sea surged with it. The fierce wind swept the waves towards the shore, and the ships in the port rocked and struggled in the great waves. The larger ships barely managed to maintain their balance, while a few smaller ships directly capsized, leading to cries from the crowd, "Oh my ship!" But very soon, no one paid any more attention to the ships. The wind blew even more violently, making it difficult for people to stand still. The crowd fell backwards like a wave of wheat. The waves on the sea became even larger, each one taller than the last, pushing over in an overwhelming manner. It was almost like a tsunami. Many unlucky people who approached the shore were directly sucked into the huge waves, dying a violent death. Clouds of blood permeated the surroundings as tiger sharks swam through the waves. The huge waves surged over, and the people on the beach all fled backwards. They pushed and shoved, trampling over one another. Cries and screams rose and fell, mixed with the sobs of children. It was a mess. Father. Ji Qingyu frowned heavily, and the other disciples were displeased too. The deaths of a few mortals was nothing, but it was far too shameful for the Cloud Sail sect. In the past, mortals would die in every sea fair, but there would never be such a great storm, nor would there be so much chaos. When the Merfolk King sets out, there will naturally be wind and waves accompanying her. Ji Changfeng raised his hand, gesturing for Ji Qingyu to calm down. He even smiled. He felt slightly irritated, but it was not for the merfolk, but for the mortals under his rule. The mortals of Three Sails City had truly lived in peace under the protection of the Cloud Sail sect for far too long. There were actually so many unrelated people who had come to watch the show this time. Did they really think they could do whatever they wanted just because they had the numbers advantage? So be it if they treated the merfolk, the hegemon of the South Sea, as outsiders, but there were actually people who were bold enough to discuss the taste of merfolk meat despite clearly knowing that the merfolk were about to arrive. They even spouted obscenities. They really did not know what was good for them. The Merfolk King had only lost her temper, which was already quite the restraint. In order to maintain the foundation of the Cloud Sail sect, he was also afraid that his disciples would become twisted, so he did not encourage them to treat mortals like lambs and ants. If they committed any crimes, they would even be punished according to the sect rules. Most of the disciples of the Cloud Sail sect came from the clan of Three Sails City, so their relationship was rather complicated. As time went on, the reverence mortals held towards cultivators was no longer as deep. As a matter of fact, they had quite a few complaints about the way the Cloud Sail sect was governed. It was time for them to learn a lesson today. The armored soldiers below began to take action, but their numbers were too small, and no one listened to them at all. They directly used their weapons to maintain order, and those who disobeyed were directly smashed with their spears. But when tens of thousands of people were in chaos, how could it be so easy to calm them down? Some of the cultivators in the air above the shore wanted to help. After all, they were all humans. No one would be happy if they died so pointlessly in the aftermath of the merfolk's attack. However, when they glanced at the platform, they all dismissed that thought. Since even the host was not doing anything, outsiders like them might end up offending the Cloud Sail sect or even the merfolk if they casually interfered. It really was not worth it for the lives of some mortals. The huge waves were still coming, and soon, a large empty space was cleared on the beach. At the same time, tens of thousands of spectators were still rushing over from Three Sails City. They had no idea what was happening on the beach, and the scene was becoming more and more chaotic. With a thought from Ji Changfeng, 3 auras surged over from the north. The thick demon Qi took the lead, while the second aura vaguely shone with Buddhist light followed closely behind. The last aura seemed to surpass the first 2 in cultivation, but for some reason, it was willing to fall behind. The 3 of them were all second heavenly tribulation cultivators, but the auras they gave off were far beyond what regular golden core cultivators could contend with, and they all moved with startling speed. They arrived above Giant Ship Island in the blink of an eye. The Buddhist light and sword Qi stopped, while the demon Qi swept past the disciples of the Cloud Sail sect, the countless cultivators of the South Sea, and even Ji Changfeng, the sect master, without any fear. It descended from the sky and directly landed in the bay. A man in white stood between the sea and the sky. His clothes ruffled as his long hair danced in the wind behind him. At that moment, the surging ocean suddenly calmed down. The water was still. The man's large figure seemed to block the sea breeze as well. Before the mortals could even respond, he turned around and bellowed out impatiently, "Shut up!" His voice was like a clap of thunder, filled with great deterrence. It drowned out the cries of the several tens of thousand people. They all froze where they were, afraid to move. Who is he? Ji Qingyu could not help but ask the question on the minds of all the cultivators. The sea fair was about to begin, and the Wind Gale King and the Merfolk King were about to meet, yet he was actually bold enough to interfere. Was it just for a few mortals? Part of Ji Changfeng's guess was correct. Li Qingshan had indeed agreed to meet the master of the sword pavilion here, and it was obviously not just for a single Yu Wufeng. He had calculated when the Merfolk Sea Fair would begin and hurried to Giant Ship Island with Yu Wufeng and Little Anne. He heard the cries from several dozen kilometers away. When he rushed over to take a look, he saw the surging waves and several tens of thousands of people trampling about. He personally believed he was not some kind-hearted person, but there was no reason for him to not save lives if he could lift a finger. He had no time to worry about what these cultivators were thinking. It was probably the tune of mortals being ants again. He suppressed the situation with a single roar and gazed at the depths of the ocean again. The feeling. An enormous presence that was as deep as the ocean surfaced from the depths of the ocean. This was a presence that only kings had. Ru Xian had guessed correctly. The Merfolk King had indeed come. At the same time, countless pairs of cold gazes passed through the inky blue seawater and gathered on Li Qingshan. The six senses of the Merfolk were very sharp. In the quiet depths of the ocean, the noise of several tens of thousands of mortals was already very disturbing. No one liked to be watched as an outsider. If this was the sea fair of the past, Ji Changfeng's senses were far superior to the elders of the Merfolk, and he could announce the arrival of the Merfolk in advance. The elders in charge of communicating with the Merfolk would then have the mortals restrain themselves and maintain silence. This year, Ji Changfeng had personally come out to welcome them. He did not care much about these small details, and the disciples did not dare to give him pointers. This caused the Merfolk King to hear many things she should not have heard. Some of the topics even touched upon taboos, so she purposely did not restrain her waves. It was not really revenge, but just to let the mortals know how powerful they were. Originally, this was not a big deal. At most, a few mortals would die. Would humans pay attention to not trample over ants on the ground when they walked? These minor details would not affect the communication between the two kings in the slightest. However, there was someone who did not know what was good for him and came out to be a hero. He directly suppressed the waves and even stood in front of the harbor. This was very displeasing. Your Majesty, let me teach this brat a lesson. In the depths of the ocean, the high priestess said to the Merfolk King. Although her clothes were luxurious and made of the highest grade Merfolk silk, it looked as soft as water. In reality, there were dozens of layers. However, her face was already very old. Even the scales on her tail had become very dim. In particular, only the whites of her eyes remained, making her look rather terrifying. The Merfolk King supported her face and half reclined on the ice crystal throne that looked like a couch. In the darkness, her close-fitting robe outlined her perfect figure, and her long hair draped over the ground. Her eyes were tightly shut, as if she was completely unaware of what was happening. Her pale chin nodded slightly. The high priestess bowed and retreated. She held up a crystal ball that clearly reflected the scene in the bay. She wiped her hand on the crystal ball lightly, and a thick fog filled the air. Seeing that the crowd had already calmed down and were no longer trampling over each other, Li Qingshan wanted to return to the island. He did not plan to directly challenge the Merfolk King here. Suddenly, a white fog rose from the ocean and spread out hazily. Before Li Qingshan could react, he had already been enveloped in it. Many palaces could be vaguely seen in the fog. They had red walls and golden tiles. The eaves and corners were arched, and they looked very realistic. Li Qingshan suddenly realized that he was standing on the streets of a busy city. The fog had already dissipated, and the peddlers were loudly selling their goods. A group of frolicking children ran past him. When he looked at himself again, he had already turned into a peddler carrying a pole and was selling his goods along the street. He carried the pole and smiled. He simply stood there without moving. Among the 5 elements, the water spirit was the most unpredictable. There were many illusions among the water spells that could confuse people's minds. As an innate water spirit, the Merfolk were naturally very skilled in these illusions. The fog was somewhat similar to the Clam King of Mirage Sea's Clam Chi, but after his trip to the Mirage Sea, these illusions were like child's play when he looked at them. They could not shake his resolve at all. The illusions changed. Suddenly, it was an alluring paradise. Fairies danced in the sky, and immortals came to receive them. Li Qingshan only admired and pondered, but he was not moved. The illusions changed again. Suddenly, it was a terrifying realm of ghosts. Evil spirits and yakshas lunged at him, but Li Qingshan did not dodge. He allowed the evil spirits to lunge at him, and then they turned into fog and dispersed. No matter how the illusions changed, they could not harm a single hair on Li Qingshan's body. He turned around and walked toward the shore. With every step, the illusions shattered layer by layer, and he walked out of the illusions in the blink of an eye. At this moment, a moving song suddenly reached his ears. It entered his ears like gossamer and wrapped around his heart, shaking his soul. This was not an auditory hallucination. The female merfolk's song was naturally seductive. There were often fishermen who threw themselves into the sea after hearing it. They would drown alive with happy smiles on their faces. Li Qingshan seemed to be entranced as well. He stood where he was and listened. He felt that the sound was similar to the dolphin sounds of his previous life, but it was countless times more beautiful. The mortals on the beach became noisy again. Regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, they all charged toward the sea as if they had gone mad. At this moment, the vast and ethereal roar of a dragon descended from the sky. It drowned out the singing and woke everyone up. Looking down from the sky, an enormous shadow swiftly swam toward Li Qingshan under the smooth surface of the sea. An enormous bubble suddenly rose next to Li Qingshan. It grew larger and larger until it was several dozen meters tall, bursting through the silk-like surface of the sea. An enormous shadow lay silently on the surface of the sea, almost sealing off the entire bay. Chapter 862. Humans were not skilled at forging artifacts. Even if they did, they would only forge some water-type arcane artifacts. Storage items like 100 treasures pouches and sumaru rings were nowhere near as common as in the Green Province. As a result, merpeople would drive whales to Giant Ship Island every time there was a merfolk sea fair. They would form caravans with all sorts of goods to trade with the cultivators of the South Sea. Many merfolk stood on the whales. There were both beautiful merfolk women and sturdy merfolk men. They looked at Li Qingshan with gazes that were either curious, cautious, cold, or hostile. Half of the whale's eye beside Li Qingshan was revealed. It was over 30 meters wide, like a lake that clearly reflected his figure. It was a demon commander, and one close to the peak of the second heavenly tribulation at that. Although it was still far from being comparable to the Great Whale King, it was still extremely massive. Li Qingshan ignored all the gazes and raised his head to look at the merfolk queen on the whale. He met a pair of eyes. At first glance, the eyes were still light blue, so clear that the bottom could be seen. But gradually, the light blue turned azure, and then inky blue. His mind seemed to be pulled into the deep sea, sucked into a bottomless abyss. It was dark and cold, constantly sinking. His body also felt a tangible pressure, like the water pressure of the deep sea. The surrounding merpeople all had different expressions. Some smiled cruelly, some sighed in pity, and some remained cold. The merfolk high priest licked her sharp teeth, her face filled with bloodthirsty delight. She thought of the last human cultivator who had met the merfolk queen's eyes and exploded with a bang. All the cultivators on the beach saw this. Some could not help but examine the merfolk queen, but before they could admire her beauty, they could not help but be drawn in by her eyes, forgetting about their surroundings. Ji Qingyu was one of them. Before he could see the merfolk queen's appearance clearly, he felt a strong sense of suffocation. He was like a mortal who did not know how to swim, or even the terror of being on the brink of death. Just when he thought he was going to die, he suddenly woke up and discovered that he was still standing on the platform, panting heavily and drenched in cold sweat. All the cultivators who dared to look at the merfolk queen reacted the same way. They all fell from the sky, no longer daring to look at the merfolk queen. That's far too terrifying. She can kill all the cultivators present apart from father with just a pair of eyes. She clearly controlled me in the end, which was why I could break free, and that's just the aftermath. Just like the wind and waves just now, it's not directed at us at all. As it turns out, we're no different from mortals before her. Doesn't that mean the man who meets her eyes is dead for sure? However, to the merfolk, Li Qingshan, but to King, Li Qingshan, Spirit Li Qingshan, Spirit Li Qingshan, Li Qing, Li Qingshan. Spirit turtles like to hide in the deep sea. A single slumber could last 1,000 years, avoiding all entanglements of karma and disasters. The spirit, and in with the spirit, and spirit, li, and spirit, the li spirit, a spirit, he the li turtles li, s, and li c. As, and a, long, and a, and, as, and, li, as, li, of. A sliver of surprise flashed through the merfolk queen's eyes. She blinked her eyes. It would have been fine if he had only been able to resist the gaze of her deep-sea pupils, but this man seemed to be enjoying it. Furthermore, the sense of tranquility that came from his pitch-black eyes seemed to have infected her, causing the little displeasure in her heart to disappear. What beautiful eyes! Li Qingshan praised from the bottom of his heart. He was tempted to stare at her a little longer. After getting rid of those eyes that were as deep as the sea, he looked at the merfolk queen again. She was half lying on the ice crystal throne, wearing an exquisite ice crystal crown on her head that tied up her long ice blue hair. Her slender neck was also wearing a gorgeous ice crystal necklace that hung down to her breasts. Her mermaid silk dress hung down to the bottom of the throne and was also decorated with many ice crystals. One of the long fishtail could be vaguely seen. Apart from that, she also possessed some characteristics of a foreign race, but the noble, icy-cold aura she gave off was enough to make people forget about all of this and become enchanted. However, while Li Qingshan was a lecher, he was also a battle maniac. He secretly assessed inside, her cultivation is higher than the myriad poison ancestors. She's mid-fire devouring king at the very least. Her strength is probably on par with the fire-devouring King Zhu Yan, or perhaps even a little stronger. If I consider these godfolk and their innate talents and abilities, I'm still not her opponent right now. How rude. Where are the guards? The great priest called out. A group of merfolk guards surrounded them on tiger sharks. The leading merman was particularly sturdy, also a second heavenly tribulation cultivator. In terms of cultivation alone, he was on par with Li Qingshan. He held an anchor covered in glyphs in his hand, eyeing Li Qingshan covetously as he considered where to smash it from. However, Li Qingshan did not even glance at him. He continued to stare at the merfolk queen, quietly waiting for her to speak. "Who are you?" the merfolk queen asked. Her voice was extremely cold, but it possessed natural charm. It was even more enchanting than the chorus of mermaids just now. Li Qingshan was not used to raising his head and talking to people, so he leapt onto the whale's back gently and arrived before the merfolk queen. He answered, "Li Qingshan." Apart from the merfolk queen and the great priest, there was also a group of merfolk elders on the whale's back. They were all at the second heavenly tribulation, giving off the tremendous aura of the ocean as they berated him loudly. Some told him to piss off, some told him to kneel, and some were basically about to capture him. Their auras were like the raging tides of the ocean, ready to erupt at any moment. Die! A bellow rang out from behind Li Qingshan, and a black figure lunged over. The captain of the merfolk guards was completely infuriated by Li Qingshan's disregard. He swung the anchor viciously at his head, possessing the terrifying power of the tides. It was a shocking sight. Li Qingshan, the merfolk queen repeated. She had heard of this name before. Although she was far away in the depths of the South Sea, as a king, she naturally had sharp ears and eyes. At this moment when war was about to erupt, she had to gather all sorts of information. Although the 3 words, King of Savages, were still somewhat exaggerated, just based on the battle with the myriad poison cult, he was no longer an insignificant character. "What about you?" Li Qingshan asked in return. The expressions of the merfolk elders changed, but it was no longer because of his rudeness. He grabbed the anchor with his right hand without looking back. The eyes of the captain of the merfolk guards almost popped out of their sockets. He gritted his teeth and pressed all his strength on the anchor, but he could not move it at all. Is he really a human? Although Gong Kuen's cultivation is not extremely strong, he is born with great strength. The tidal anchor weighs 5,000 kilograms. If it smashes down like this, I'm afraid no one can withstand it other than Her Majesty. Me? The merfolk queen was silent for a moment, as if she had not expected him to ask this. Her name was known throughout the entire South Sea. He had clearly asked this only for the sake of equality. She glanced at the anchor in his hand again. Chapter 863. However, she had wrongly accused Li Qingshan. He really did not know her name. Although he had heard Ru Xian introduce the situation in the South Sea, for some reason, Ru Xian did not say what the mermaid queen's name was. Li Qingshan did not care. After all, when it came to a person, it was just a symbol. It did not matter what their name was. During this short conversation, the captain of the merfolk guard, Gong Kuen, felt like he had been humiliated before the queen, which made him even more furious. He abandoned the anchor, and the muscles on his arms bulged, immediately becoming covered in scales that flickered with a metallic luster. He suddenly turned into a blurry blur, hurling a barrage of punches at Li Qingshan's defenseless back. Every single punch possessed the power to split mountains. Li Qingshan did not seem to feel it. He did not even look at it, much less dodge. The black and red demon chi automatically protected him, turning into vortexes that easily dispelled the force of the punches. The fists could not even touch his clothes. This was a battle technique from ocean wielding. Although he had completely refined the ocean pearl, his use of this battle technique had become even more exquisite. Idiot, do you think that my overlapping waves technique is only this? I'll show you how powerful it is now. The force was like a torrential wave, continuously stacking and surging. The demon chi vortex was gradually unable to withstand it. Die! Gong Kuen suddenly roared. His right arm thickened again, and he punched at Li Qingshan's back. Are you done playing? Li Qingshan finally turned around. He raised his left palm to block Gong Kuen's fist. Looking at Gong Kuen's twisted and shocked face, he had the urge to swing the tidal anchor in his right hand. He only needed a light smash to kill this mermaid. Even the mermaid queen would not be able to save him. However, he gave up after thinking about it. He was not here to start a feud with the mermaids of the South Sea. Gong Kuen, step down. Gong Yuan's eyes flashed. Feeling the sudden change in Li Qingshan's aura, she could not help but sit up straight. She was shocked by his audacity. He actually dared to have murderous intent in front of her. He was either arrogant or fearless. The elders all looked at one another. Sure enough, Li Qingshan's title as the King of Savages was not just for show. Gong Kuen attacked with all his might, but he could not even test out his true strength. It was as if he was a naughty child messing around with an adult. If he angered the adult, he would be slapped, and the naughty child would be half dead. Other than the queen, no one was his match. Furthermore, he was so young. Meant that as long as he did not die, he would definitely become a great cultivator in the future. The 9 states had many talents. Gong Kuen retreated before he received the order. He was stunned for a moment before bowing. Yes. He was still in a state of shock. Just now, when their eyes met, a murderous aura surged towards him, as if he was facing a terrifying deep-sea giant beast. Now that he had come back to his senses, it was just an ordinary man with a smile on his face. According to the standards of the merfolk, he could not be considered handsome, but he had a heroic spirit that could not be ignored. As the captain of the guards, I am not afraid of death. Stupid Kuan, who allowed you to come up here? Get out of here. Gong Kuan was about to stand guard beside the ice crystal throne when a voice rang in his mind. His expression became more and more strange. It was because the person who spoke was not someone else, but the giant whale below. It was impatient of being stepped on by him, so it sent a telepathic message to chase him away. This blue whale demon general was the exclusive mount of the Mermaid Queen. It had grown up in the South Sea and was said to be the descendant of the Great Whale King. It was already more than 7,000 years old and had witnessed the countless changes of the South Sea mermaids. It was at the peak of the second heavenly tribulation. Once it passed the third heavenly tribulation, it would become the divine beast protector of the mermaids. Its position in the tribe was extremely high, and it was called Elder Blue. This Elder Blue had a bad temper. Normally, it would not allow anyone to get on its back. Today, the queen was traveling and had to discuss matters with the elders along the way, so it reluctantly gave them a ride. Now that Li Qingshan had stood on its back for so long, it did not react at all. Instead, it was chasing him away. Gong Yuan, as deep as the ocean. What a good name. Li Qingshan casually threw the anchor back to Gong Kuan. Gong Kuan looked at Li Qingshan with dissatisfaction. Li Qingshan had already turned his head to talk to the Mermaid Queen. He could only get off the back of the whale helplessly and look at the lake-like eyes of the whale with a face full of complaints. Sigh, you still refuse to admit it when I say you're stupid. Why don't you take a look at your anchor? This kid might only be at the second heavenly tribulation, but his strength is unfathomable. Even I'm probably not his opponent, so what do you have to be displeased about? He's the White Hawk commander of the Hawk Wolf Guard, and his master is the monk king of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. As long as a guy like him doesn't directly oppose us, it's fine even if he's slightly rude. Don't tell me you want to create an enemy for us for no reason. Elder Long communicated with him. To put it bluntly, politeness and impoliteness depended on strength. If mortals spoke carelessly, they should be killed and taught a lesson. However, even if Li Qingshan climbed onto the whale's back and asked for the Mermaid Queen's name, it would still make perfect sense. Gong Kuan looked down and saw that there was a handprint on the anchor. He was shocked. He had picked up this anchor from a sunken giant ship. He did not know how many times he had refined it to this size. It was incomparably sturdy, but he had actually left a mark on it. He looked at the back of the whale again. Under the stars, the man's figure suddenly grew taller. The name Li Qingshan is a little mediocre, said Gong Yuan coldly. Gong Yuan said coldly. Although she had managed to recognize Li Qingshan's strength, it did not mean they could treat each other as equals. Then you can call me Erlang. I'm the second in the family, said Li Qingshan with a smile. There was clearly a hint of mockery in his words. The merfolk elders were all enraged, but the merfolk queen still had a cold look on her face. Little Li II, why are you blocking my way and obstructing the sea market? Little Li II. Li Qingshan rubbed his nose. He never thought the Mermaid Queen's mouth would really resemble Ruexian's a little. At a closer glance, although her bearing was cold and filled with the dignity of a king, her facial features really did resemble Ruexian slightly. Was she somehow related to Ruexian? All he saw was Gong Yuan's expression becoming colder and colder. How can a mere waiter block your majesty's path? I've come to lead the way for you. Li Qingshan turned around and raised his hand. Please look. That's where the sea fair will be held. It's called Giant Ship Island, and there are 3 mountains on it. They're called Major Cloud Mast Mountain, Center Cloud Mast Mountain, and Giant Cloud Mast Mountain. Li Qingshan introduced Giant Cloud Mast Mountain and the Sea Fair fluently. He had heard it all from Ru Xian at the last minute, so there were many mistakes and omissions. The expressions of all the merfolk became extremely strange. Who knew how many times they had already held the Sea Fair, yet they still needed an outsider to introduce it. If you want to introduce it, you should at least ask around a little more. What's with Giant Cloud Mast Mountain? With a snigger, a mermaid laughed. The great priest glared at her, and she covered her mouth in a hurry, but she was unable to hide the smile in her eyes. This human sure is bold. He's actually bold enough to spout nonsense before the queen. He might not be handsome, but he's rather interesting. And, even that vicious bastard, Gong Kun, isn't his opponent. Look over there. That's the sect master of Cloud Mast Mountain, fellow Ji Changfeng. He's known as the Wind Gale King, and he wields the Hylian flag. Li Qingshan smiled at the laughing mermaid before pointing at the platform on the beach. The corner of Ji Changfeng's eye twitched. Not only did Li Qingshan not say anything bad about him, but he even praised him very highly instead, saying things like, the Wind Gale King shakes the South Sea with his might, and even the King of Southern Yu has to show him some respect. However, he felt indescribably irritated. He was tempted to wave the Hylian flag and blow him back to the Green Province. This Li Qingshan. Ji Qingyu was speechless, but he could not help but feel admiration for him. Before countless cultivators and merfolk of the South Sea, he was able to speak and smile at ease between two kings, without losing out at all. This was the king of savages. Shut up. We don't need you to introduce us. Get down. The mermaid high priest rebuked furiously. Li Qingshan glanced at her. When I'm speaking with Her Majesty, it's best if you don't interrupt us. You. Ji Changfeng felt like he could not keep watching like this. He coughed lightly and clasped his hands. Fellow Gong, long time no see. And, my friends, you've come from afar, so I've failed to welcome you. Please enter the port. And this, little friend, thank you for your introduction. That's enough. Don't make everyone wait too long. After a moment of hesitation, he still ended up referring to Li Qingshan as a little friend. This form of address contained a sense of treating him as an equal, but it was also not a fellow on equal footing. You're far too polite, old friend. I've basically said everything. Since you don't need me, I'll be taking my leave first. Li Qingshan clasped his hands at Ji Changfeng. Although he was slightly surprised, he had already achieved his objective. This sort of acknowledgement seemed like an empty title, but it was actually extremely important. It was directly related to a series of plans. I must say, as a king of a race, your majesty's breadth of mind far surpasses that bastard Zhu Yan's. Hold on. You've met Zhu Yan? Li Qingshan said. He was about to leave when Gong Yuan, who had been cold the entire time, finally changed. I've met him once, but it wasn't a pleasant experience. Li Qingshan shrugged. Gong Yuan seemed to be in thought. She glanced at Li Qingshan deeply. Little Li II, you stay here and enter the port with us. It's an honor. But if you can change the way you refer to me, I'll enter the port. Gong Yuan ordered, and the blue whale swam towards the port. Li Qingshan shook his head. He turned around and arrived on the blue whale's head, standing against the wind. Interacting with this merfolk queen was much smoother than interacting with the fire-devouring king. While other folk were favored by the heavens, they were also influenced by their natural elemental attributes, especially the 7 great other folk races. The Yin attribute night roamers were sinister and mysterious, while the fire attribute fire devourers were violent and easily angered, while the water attribute merfolk were a little more gentle and tolerant. Of course, this was only in comparison. The merfolk queen was ice-cold and deep, like the ocean abyss. She was definitely not someone easy to deal with. The main reason why she was willing to tolerate his rudeness was because of his strength and background. The battle against the myriad poison cult played a decisive role too. Chapter 864. The first time Egua met Zhu Yan was after this battle. Zhu Yan probably wouldn't be so irritable. If he had transcended the third heavenly tribulation, Zhu Yan would definitely listen to his conditions in exchange for the divine Wutong wood. Even if he was angry, he wouldn't directly fall out with him. If he reached the Banyan Tree King's realm, Zhu Yan would have to consider whether to make the deal. Even if he rejected, he would be quite polite and show the other side of the fire-devouring folk. In the end, the tongue of the weak couldn't compare to the nonsense of the strong. The group of cultivators led by Ji Changfeng saw Li Qingshan riding the whale over in the wind. He was at the highest point of the merfolk, as if he was the main character of the sea market this time. "Kid, it's fine if you're standing on my back, but how dare you stand on my head? Don't you know how to respect your elders?" Li Qingshan was slightly stunned. He understood that the one who spoke was the blue whale under his feet. He could not help but laugh. Respecting elders is a human's idea. If we're talking about age, demons should be the leaders of all living beings. Why are you being ordered around by a mutant and not learning from the great whale king to roam the deep sea? Humph, you have a sharp tongue. When the sea market opens, I'll compete with you and see who's stronger. Elder Blue said indignantly. Sure. Li Qingshan knew that this was most likely Gong Yuan's instructions. She wanted to test his true strength. Just a title alone could not suppress her. However, he had expressed some hostility towards the fire-devouring folk, so it was not convenient for her to personally take action. Letting this blue whale demon commander take action was only a competition, not an enemy. Humph, then come and try. You're so young, yet you dare to talk about the great whale king. Do you know what the great whale king looks like? Although Elder Blue instinctively felt that Li Qingshan was not easy to deal with, his heart still jumped when he heard him agree so painfully. I was lucky enough to hear a whale song. Ah, you're really lucky. You're also very lucky. Humph, of course I've heard the whale song. That's not what I'm talking about. Then what is it? You met me. What kind of blessing is that? In the future, you can tell people that you once carried me on your back and chatted with me. People will definitely praise you for your good fortune. Stinking brat, you dare to make fun of me? Do you believe that I won't throw you down right now? Who's making fun of you? I'm serious. Serious? Elder Blue was stunned for a moment. He sounded serious, as if he was telling a fact that was inevitable, just like the sun rising from the east and setting in the west. Bah! I was almost fooled by you. Just you wait. Li Qingshan laughed, and his laughter echoed throughout the bay. Because he was communicating with Elder Blue, no one knew what he was laughing about. They all looked at him in surprise, not knowing what he was laughing about. When the whales arrived near the shore, the sky had already completely darkened. The starry sky above the sea was especially brilliant. The large clouds were like islands in the sea of stars, blotting out the moon from time to time and casting darkness. There was not a single spark on the beach or even in the entire three-sail city. Merfolk were naturally averse to fire, so lighting a fire before them was a form of disrespect. In the beginning, only those who participated in the sea fair were allowed to do so. Afterwards, it became a tradition on Giant Ship Island that the entire island was forbidden from using fire during the sea fair. However, the bay was resplendent. A large school of fish swam about in the dark blue, transparent water. They shone with a faint green light, while thousands of jellyfish shone with a faint blue light as they bobbed up and down in the water. There were also strange fish with tentacles on their heads that seemed like lanterns, as well as shrimps that flickered and swam about like fireflies. They seemed to scatter a handful of stars in the water, illuminating the sea magnificently. What was even more dazzling was the backs of the whales. Deep-sea pearls were stored in baskets made from coral and seaweed. They shone with a pure, white, and gentle light. The pearls were multicolored, competing with one another for beauty. The most eye-catching thing was a coral mountain the size of a fake mountain. Its colors constantly changed in a dazzling manner. The huge whales seemed to be carrying the treasures of the entire world, competing with the bright moon and stars in the sky. Clouds and mist rose up from the surface of the sea. The merfolk rode on the clouds, moving the dazzling array of marine goods from the backs of the whales onto the soft clouds, drifting to the beach with the sea breeze. Although merfolk could conjure legs, most of them were not used to the feeling of having a split tail. The disciples of the Cloud Sail sect came over to receive them. They were in charge of registering the goods and classifying them before sending them to the Sky Sea Pavilion on Little Cloud Sail Mountain for people to choose from. However, the most eye-catching things were the beautiful merfolk women. Every single one of them was a beauty created by the heavens, but they were all beautiful in their own way. They did not follow the etiquette of the human world, laughing and joking freely, but they did not seem unrestrained at all. They seemed pure and innocent. Under the encirclement of the clouds and the illumination of the treasures, the bay seemed to become a paradise. Let alone the mortals, even the cultivators were unable to shift their gazes away. Li Qingshan was used to this, so he was amazed too. In ancient times, other folk referred to themselves as godfolk. They were not exactly boasting. In the eyes of mortals, they really did seem like godfolk. In particular, races like the night roamers, fire devourers, and merfolk possessed innate strength and lifespan that far surpassed mortals. Even their appearances were utterly perfect, making people completely overlook the characteristics of other races. As a matter of fact, they even possessed a special charm. Even if human beauties could compare to them in terms of appearance, they would not be able to match up to them in terms of bearing. In terms of value, these merfolk women were indeed the most precious goods present. If a merfolk woman was sold to the Dragon Province, she would be worth even more than the goods on the backs of whales. Their tears could be turned into precious merfolk pearls, their eyes could be made into priceless condensed jade pearls, their scales were precious medicinal ingredients, and even their tails were a supreme delicacy. It was a dish that could not be missed in the imperial court's banquets. For the sake of tasting the most delicious merfolk meat, some of the most fastidious diners would imprison the merfolk women in special rain trays before using extremely sharp ice blades to slice off extremely thin pieces of meat, eating them immediately without adding any seasoning. The coldness from the ice blades would freeze the wounds, preventing them from bleeding. The merfolk women had to remain conscious. Not only did they have to endure the pain of death by 1,000 cuts, but they also had to endure tremendous mental pain, making them cry out in despair. The sound of their tears falling onto the jade trays was the most beautiful music in the world. Then, they admired the merfolk's beautiful figure and appearance, allowing the diners to enjoy multiple senses of sight, hearing, and taste. This dish was called Flowing Pearls of the Bright Moon. Back then, Li Qingshan could not help but sigh when he heard that, if you don't have a heart of stone, how are you supposed to eat it, let alone enjoy it? Chapter 865. Although other folk and humans both shared the same word, their hatred for one another was so deep that it completely surpassed their hatred for the demons who ate the most humans. It was probably because demons could not tell so much from eating, and being killed and eaten was a common occurrence. What surprised Li Qingshan even more was Ruexian's attitude. Just like how she felt for her own kind, she was extraordinarily indifferent towards merfolk, as if she did not treat herself as a merfolk at all. At the same time, she did not treat herself as a human either. Thinking up to there, Li Qingshan glanced around the beach, but he did not find any traces of Ruexian. They had split up, so he had no idea where she was right now. However, he was not worried either. With the myriad poison ancestors' protection, she definitely would not be in any danger. The duration of the merfolk sea fair was not fixed either. It could be as short as a night or as long as several days. This time, Gong Yuan had come in person, so it would probably be a little longer, so he was not afraid of missing it. "Kid, we've already reached the shore. Why aren't you getting off?" Elder Blue lost his temper. He swung his tail and kicked up a huge wave. Gong Yuan had already disembarked from the whale's back with the elders, currently meeting with Ji Changfeng on the platform. The two of them glanced over from time to time. Only Li Qingshan remained standing on the large blue whale, as if he was waiting for something. He smiled at Ji Changfeng and Gong Yuan before crossing his legs and patting Elder Blue's smooth head. Don't be in such a hurry. I'm waiting for someone. TSK, kid, are you really treating me as your mount? Get off me right now. If it were not for the fact that Elder Blue was afraid of disrupting the sea fair, he would have gone all out against Li Qingshan right now. As he said that, another figure flew over from the cloud mountains on the horizon. His target was Elder Blue's head. Let's see who else dares to come. Ah, what a beautiful little girl. Elder Blue was surprised for a moment. He forgot to get angry and let Little N land on his head. That is. A ray of light flashed across Ji Changfeng's eyes. When he was young, he was also very promiscuous and flirtatious. Now that he had reached this age, although he had long thrown this thought out of the 9 heavens and thought that he had seen all kinds of beauties, he would no longer be stunned by them. However, at this moment, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. There's actually such a beauty in the world. There are so many talents in the 9 prefectures. Ji Qingyu and the rest of the cultivators with weaker composure were even more stunned, unable to shift their gazes away. The mermaid girls were indeed beautiful, but compared to her, it was like the difference between a pearl and the moon. They could not compete with her in terms of splendor. She didn't have any accessories on her, it was as if there were only 2 colors of black and white. Her hair was black, her eyes were white, and her skin was snow white. She was even better than the Mermaid Queen. She's Little Anne. Just now, the dragon's roar came from her mouth. It said that she's even younger than Li Qingshan. She shouldn't even be 30 yet. Such cultivation is truly terrifying. Although most humans are mediocre, with billions of them, a genius would occasionally appear, and even gods would be left in the dust. That's how they were able to unify the 9 prefectures. Gong Yuan thought to herself, but do Buddhist disciples also cultivate the art of charm? It's not as simple as the art of charm. Although the path of white bone and great beauty contained many techniques such as artifact forging and alchemy, there was no such thing as the art of charm. It derived the path of life and death, the appearance of emptiness. Great beauty as color, white bone as emptiness. The 2 words great beauty contained the pinnacle of beauty in the mortal world, and only then could it reflect the emptiness of white bone. It was not the art of charm, but it far surpassed all other arts of charm. It originated from the very essence, directly targeting one's heart. The people from the Sword Tower sure are slow. This is probably the so-called show of strength again. Do you think I'm the one begging you? If you're so good, then don't come. Li Qingshan found a bronze mask and had Little and put it on. Then, he called out to the sky, Yu Wufeng. The South Sea Sword Tower was just a pawn in the first place. It was not like he was the one asking the master of the Sword Tower for help, so it was good that they did not come to make trouble for him. Yu Wufeng stood in the sky and stared in the direction of the South Sea Sword Tower, but he did not see any sword flashes flying over. When he heard Li Qingshan's call, he showed a helpless expression. He turned into a streak of white light and arrived before Li Qingshan, but he did not land on the whale. He clasped his hands and said, "What are your orders, my king? It's not good to keep waiting like this. The brother below is already unwilling. If your master wants to come, he'll naturally come. Let's go ashore first." Li Qingshan said. "Yes," Yu Wufeng said. Yu Wufeng." Elder Blue exclaimed in surprise. Although they had only met once many years ago, both that streak of white light and that head of white hair left too deep of an impression. It's been many years. I didn't think Elder Blue would still remember me. Yu Wufeng smiled. After Little and put on the mask, he had just caused a wave of disappointment. Yu Wufeng's appearance immediately caused an even greater uproar. It really is him, the fogbow swordsman, Yu Wufeng. Didn't he betray the South Sea Sword Pavilion? Why does he still dare to come to the South Sea? Your information is too outdated. This is the South Sea Sword Pavilion's plan. They wanted him to seize Savage Mountain. However, they never thought that this Li Qingshan would interfere. Not only did he fail to become king of savages, but he even lost himself in it. Yu Wufeng sighed inside when he heard these discussions. When he looked back, there were quite a few familiar faces among the South Sea cultivators on the beach. Just now, he was unwilling to come down because there were too many familiar faces below. However, he was calm now, clasping his hands from afar to show that he had met them. Almost all the cultivators returned the greeting from afar. In terms of reputation among the South Sea cultivators, Yu Wufeng was much more renowned than Li Qingshan. He had been a great genius in the past, wielding the fogbow sword and roaming the South Sea alone. He had been in the limelight for a time. Afterwards, he betrayed the South Sea Sword Pavilion and became the first cave master of Savage Mountain, which added to his legend. Now that he had returned to the South Sea, the fogbow sword was still the same, but his cultivation had improved. He was only a step away, which should have been something worthy of celebration. However, he had been bound by the blood oath scroll and become someone else's slave. How could people not sigh emotionally? A few of Yu Wufeng's old friends made their way over as soon as they saw him, but when they saw him refer to Li Qingshan as king and stand behind him silently, they all stopped and hesitated. They felt very conflicted inside. They would rather they had never seen this. Wufeng, you're quite popular in the South Sea, Li Qingshan smiled. My king, don't look at how I am now. I was once a swordsman too. With this meter-long sword, I saved people from danger, Yu Wufeng said. Yu Wufeng said. After experiencing the various matters, he had already accepted Li Qingshan wholeheartedly. In particular, the myriad poison ancestors' fate delighted him greatly. He no longer considered becoming enemies with Li Qingshan anymore. This was not because he feared Li Qingshan's strength. As a sword cultivator, if he did not possess a staunch and unyielding character that would rather break than bend, it would have been impossible for him to reach his current level of cultivation. He accepted Li Qingshan out of admiration and recognition. Yeah, you don't seem like a demonic cultivator to me. Don't worry, even if your master doesn't come, I'll remove the blood oath in the future. Li Qingshan patted his shoulder. Someone like him had not taken the initiative to become enemies with him, nor was he a demonic cultivator who was guilty of countless crimes. If it were possible, Li Qingshan was willing to let him continue down the path of cultivation. Then thank you, my king. If I'm lucky enough to undergo the third heavenly tribulation, I'll definitely repay you. What Yu Wufeng feared the most was that Li Qingshan would use the blood oath scroll to suppress him for the rest of his life. Suddenly receiving this promise, he could not help but be taken aback. He knew that Li Qingshan was not a person who kept his promises easily, so he could not help but admire his breadth of mind. If it were someone else, even if they had no use for Yu Wufeng, they would never spare him so easily, afraid that he would take revenge after undergoing the third heavenly tribulation. However, Li Qingshan was not afraid. His breadth of mind and boldness originated from absolute confidence. Once he underwent the third heavenly tribulation, even if Yu Wufeng fell out with him, all he would have to do was kill him with a single punch. I hope it's not revenge. Li Qingshan smiled. He believed in his own insight. As a genius sword cultivator, Yu Wufeng was not a petty person like that. If the gentleman of heavenly blubber or some other demonic cultivator were in his position, he would never have done this. Even if it was a promise, it would probably be a bluff. Never. I can swear on my heart of the sword that I'll never become your enemy. Actually, we shouldn't have been enemies in the first place. It's all just a coincidence and fate. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm in a hurry to return to the South Sea Sword Pavilion, so actually, the chances of me undergoing the tribulation aren't great. Perhaps it's my fortune instead that I've been dealt this blow and tempered a little more. I only hope that we can speak as equals when the time comes. I don't have to call you king anymore, Yu Wufeng said from the bottom of his heart. If he cast aside their conflict, everything that Li Qingshan had done in the Mist Province, subduing the cave master of Savage Mountain, sweeping through the demons of the south, destroying the myriad poison cult, and slaughtering 100,000 bone-eating shamans, were all things that he wanted to do but could not. Even if he underwent the third heavenly tribulation and became a great sword cultivator, he would not be able to subdue the myriad poison ancestor, nor would he be bold enough to fall out with the bone-eating shaman king. If he had a choice, he would be extremely willing to befriend Li Qingshan. Sure. Actually, I don't want to trample on others and abuse my authority, but there are some people who won't treat you as a human if you don't trample on them. Li Qingshan shook his head. Because he had once ridden on Brother Ox's back, he refused to lower his head to anyone. It was also exactly because he had witnessed Brother Ox's strength that he understood how distant the 9 heavens were, which was why it was very difficult for him to develop the mentality of a so-called expert who treated mortals like ants. Looking down from above, he was just a slightly stronger ant. He had just gained some strength, yet he thought he was impressive, acting all high and mighty. Even he himself found it embarrassing. He had only stood before the merfolk queen and said a few words normally, yet he had been labeled as arrogant. He had only called Zhu Yan fellow, yet he had been mocked without restraint. Just who was the arrogant one here? Yu Wufeng felt ashamed. If he had conversed with Zhu Yan as an equal in the past, it would have never ended up like this. He had been confident in his strength and possessed a geographical advantage, so he did not take Li Qingshan seriously at all. He even blamed him for ruining his plans on Savage Mountain. In the end, he only thought of befriending him after being trampled underfoot, which basically answered what he had said. Get down here. Elder Blue flew into a rage. It's not like I'm talking about you. Alright, alright, alright. I'll get down right now. Li Qingshan suddenly discovered that if he said that from Elder Blue's head, he would really be pointing at a bald man and scolding a monk. He had been implicated while he was doing nothing. The rumors really are true. His current cultivation is actually a little more powerful than I anticipated. He really is a genius of the sword. Who can give up on a disciple like that so easily? If my sect had a successor like that, I'd probably have to agree to whatever conditions Li Qingshan brings up. It'll be enough to ensure that the Cloud Sail sect remains in power for a millennium. Yi Duanhai's in for a headache. As Ji Changfeng pondered, he gave Ji Qingyu a meaningful look. Ji Qingyu flew over. I am Ji Qingyu. I've come under the sect master's orders to invite the 3 of you to the platform. He could not help but glance at Little and again, meeting Yutong behind the bronze mask before immediately shifting his gaze. Chapter 866. Looks like your master still cares quite a bit about you, Li Qingshan said to Yu Wufeng with a smile. Yu Wufeng subconsciously tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword and gave an almost undetectable grunt. That was his master. The ray of sword light that was grand and resplendent like a star seemed to have noticed Yu Wufeng's existence as well. It suddenly sped up like a shooting star that tore through the sky, leaving behind a long trail of light as it flew over. Everyone on the beach raised their heads and stared at the star's descent. The resplendent light rapidly expanded in their vision, and in the blink of an eye, the star landed and turned into a middle-aged man. He had a grayish beard and wore a large cloak. He wore a tall crown on his head that was adorned with dark golden ornaments. His wide sleeves were folded before his chest, and he held a simple sword in his arms. He and his sword radiated with a stern, murderous aura. He was the master of the sword pavilion, Yi Duanhai. Master. Yu Wufeng took a few steps forward and knelt on one knee, leaning on his sword with his right hand. Rise. Yi Duanhai was so stern that he was almost cold. He did not even have any intentions of helping Yu Wufeng up. However, the sea-splitting sword in his arms clearly thrummed, demonstrating his inner turmoil. I'm useless and have failed you. Please punish me, master. Yu Wufeng lowered his head. The fog bow sword in his hand flickered with white light. Your cultivation is fine. You haven't wasted all these years. Once you return, go to the sword punishment pavilion and receive your punishment. Yes. Yu Wufeng stood up. Only now did Yi Duanhai shift his gaze away from his disciple. This great sword cultivator filled with determination did not even waste a single moment to look at Gong Yuan and Ji Changfeng. He immediately locked onto Li Qing. You're Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan felt like he had been cut by a sword wherever his gaze passed by. He was only 10 steps away from Yi Duanhai. Even to mortal swordsmen, this was a lethal distance, let alone one of the few great sword cultivators in the world. Sword cultivators had the sword as their heart. Even their nascent souls were sword nascent. The path of attack dominated the world. At the same level of cultivation, sword cultivators could basically completely defeat other cultivators. It was as if a peerless sword was placed across Li Qingshan's neck. With just a thought, he would be beheaded. However, Li Qingshan completely believed that Yi Duanhai wanted to do that very much. No one liked being threatened, especially by a weakling. Li Qingshan was extremely glad that he had fought the myriad poison ancestor in the past and not the one before him. He probably would have blown up his sword nascent without the slightest hesitation and taken him down with him. That's right. Li Qingshan stared back fearlessly, a smile involuntarily appearing on his face. If the feeling of staring into the merfolk queen's eyes was extremely comfortable for the spirit turtle, then this was the rhythm that the tiger demon liked the most. Powerful enemies, suppressed killing intent, and lethal threats. The moment he saw Li Qingshan, Yi Duanhai knew that the situation was troublesome. With his many years of experience, he could tell with a single glance that Li Qingshan was one of the few brave and resolute people in the world. He would not be easily threatened. As he said that, he made a surprising discovery. This kid isn't afraid of fighting me. He even seems to desire it. This could not be faked at all. However, it was already extremely rare for a second heavenly tribulation cultivator to maintain his fighting spirit when he faced a great sword cultivator. What was with his fighting spirit becoming more and more exuberant? Was he really not afraid of death, or did he have some sort of confidence? Yi Duanhai's plan was to directly restrain Li Qingshan and search for the Blood Oath Scroll. It was simple and straightforward. Even if he could not restrain Li Qingshan in time, he refused to believe that Li Qingshan would be so disrespectful to his life that he would actually try to take him down with him. However, when he saw how Li Qingshan behaved, he could not help but hesitate. However, it was only for a split second. His mind immediately recovered its calmness, almost icy cold. As a matter of fact, he even dismissed his worry for his beloved disciple and dealt with the matter with absolute rationality. The sea-splitting sword was about to be drawn. A battle was about to erupt. A figure suddenly stood between him and Li Qingshan. Master, please reconsider. After receiving Li Qingshan's promise, Yu Wufeng felt much more at ease. At the same time, he made up his mind that he could not allow the South Sea Sword Pavilion to become enemies with Li Qingshan. Only he knew just how terrifying of an enemy he would be. Yi Duanhai frowned. No one knew a disciple better than a master. This disciple of his had never been someone who feared death. He would not back down from this gamble just because his life was in danger. Very good. Yi Duanhai spat out those two words as if they were gold before turning around and making his way towards the platform. This matter had to do with his disciple, as well as the future of the entire South Sea Sword Pavilion. After receiving such a clear warning, he would not stubbornly insist on taking the gamble. He was prepared to think of a countermeasure and observe the situation. It was not like Li Qingshan and Yu Wufeng were here, so the situation could not worsen. He was confident about that. His gaze paused on Little N for a moment. He had already guessed her identity, and he sensed a profound and unpredictable sword intent. With her age, it was impossible for her to possess such a sword intent. Moreover, she was not a sword cultivator. Was she hiding a treasured sword? His senses were very accurate, but it was not because he had discovered the existence of the Buddha-slaying sword. After Li Qingshan gave up on the path of the sword, he had given the three absolutes calligraphy to little N to refine. They complemented each other. Li Qingshan nodded towards Yu Wufeng, indicating that he could move about freely. He showed a hint of gratitude as he deliberated over his words, considering how he should tell his master. After all, the blood oath scroll was present. If he accidentally leaked the secret, the blood oath would be no laughing matter. He had finally reached this step after so much difficulty, and he could already see the light at the end of the tunnel. If he lost his life because of a single careless word, that would be the greatest joke in the world. His life was fine, but once he was cursed to death by the Blood Oath Scroll, the South Sea Sword Pavilion would definitely not rest until Li Qingshan was dead. He would become a sinner of the South Sea Sword Pavilion. He was about to catch up to Yi Duanhai when calls of surprise and joy rang out by his ears. Senior brother Wu Feng, Peng Jingni and the other disciples of the Sword Pavilion immediately surrounded Yu Wufeng. Li Qingshan and Little End exchanged glances. As long as Yi Duanhai did not fall out with them as soon as they met, the chances of them taking action would be greatly reduced. Everything was going according to plan. Most importantly, he had no fundamental conflict with the South Sea Sword Pavilion. He did not plan on using Wufeng to threaten Yi Duanhai. This was just a deal. I've captured your disciple in a battle of life and death, and he knows many of my secrets. Of course, it's impossible for you to take him back as soon as you open your mouth. It makes sense for you to pay a slight price. If it were Ji Changfeng or the Merfolk Queen making this deal, it would be perfectly normal. Yi Duanhai would not have behaved like this at all. Instead, he would have negotiated from the very beginning. As a result, the crux of the matter was still equality. It's been several years since we last met. Your cultivation has improved. Peng Jingni stood out from the crowd and took the initiative to greet Li Qingshan. Although Li Qingshan had hidden his demon qi, he did not purposefully suppress the demon qi from his demon heart. After exploding and condensing many times, his demon heart had become much more powerful than before. Chapter 867. At least it's not too slow. I just never thought the promise of the past would only be fulfilled now. Li Qingshan thought back to when Peng Jingni and Qian Liangmu had visited Savage Mountain together. Before he knew it, several years had already passed. If this is slow, then there's nothing fast in the world. In just a few years, you've swept through the demonic cultivators of the south, defeated the myriad poison cult, and slaughtered countless bone-eating tribes. Right now, who doesn't know the name of the king of savages in the Mist Province? I just hope we can reach a satisfactory conclusion today, Peng Jingni said from the bottom of his heart. Probably no one had imagined Li Qingshan would rise up so quickly. That'll depend on whether your master takes me seriously or not. Li Qingshan smiled. Who can take the mighty king of savages lightly? Peng Jingni shook his head with a bitter smile. The two of them conversed happily, but the elders and disciples of the South Sea Sword Pavilion behind them were not so friendly. Many of them showed hostility in their eyes. Not only had Li Qingshan destroyed the South Sea Sword Pavilion's plans, but he had even enslaved Yu Wufeng, forcing the master of the Sword Pavilion to lead everyone to Giant Ship Island. They were obviously not in a good mood. Some of the older elders were still able to keep a straight face, but the younger disciples were not as good at maintaining their composure. If Peng Jingni had not expressed his stance quickly, probably some of them would have been unable to hold themselves back from mocking Li Qingshan, which would have led to many more setbacks in their lives. Yu Wufeng saw this and nodded to himself. Junior brother Peng had already done a very good job as the first senior brother. Sir, Ji Qingyu called out carefully from the side. I've made you wait. We'll be going right now. Li Qingshan arrived on the platform with little N and clasped his hands. I've long heard of the Wind Gale King's great name. Now that I've seen you today, you really do live up to your reputation. I'll be troubling you for the next few days. The King of Savages has graced the Cloud Sail sect with your presence. Please wait a moment. There really is quite a lot of goods this time. Ji Changfeng returned the gesture politely, treating Li Qingshan as an equal. Although there are many things, there doesn't seem to be anything particularly precious. The goods on the whale's back were naturally priceless to ordinary cultivators, but Li Qingshan did not think much of them. Of course, he knew that the truly valuable goods would not be placed outside, but in the Sumeru ring and 100 treasures pouch. That was very strange. Could it be that the two great cultivators and the merfolk queen were here just to look at these common goods? The myriad poison ancestor had the right to do so, but according to the plan, the myriad poison ancestor would never appear at a time like this. This was clearly stated in the letter of visit. And, the master of the sword pavilion definitely would not be willing to wait. After speaking a little with Gong Yuan and Ji Changfeng, Yi Duanhai arrived on the edge of the platform alone with his sword. He was currently conversing with Yu Wufeng. He was extremely serious, but he did not show any dissatisfaction at all. When the sea fair opens, fellow Taoist will naturally see it. However, fellow Taoist might not know this. Ji Changfeng paused for a moment. This time, the head butler of the Yu King's mansion, Mr. Ram, isn't he here? Yu Wangfu. Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. This was not within his expectations. He had no idea whether it would affect the plan or not. Whatever. How could he calculate everything in life? He'd just take it one step at a time. In the northern sky, a mountain of clouds moved against the wind. Instead, they were renowned for their indestructible defenses and terrifying destructive power. He doubted whether they could take down this thing even if they worked together. Only a single person knew the answer among everyone present. It was not Ji Changfeng, Gong Yuan, or Yi Duanhai, but Little An, as the king's estate of the Green Province also possessed a similar Scarlet Dragon King. And the answer was, absolutely not. This was a war machine that great cultivators of Moism had created after expending tremendous amounts of time, effort, and materials that could be used to forge many arcane treasures. Compared to regular soaring dragon ships, it was like the difference between nascent soul cultivators and foundation establishment cultivators. Its purpose was not to deal with individual cultivators, but to destroy sections. If the Silver Dragon King launched an attack, the protective formation of the Cloud Sail sect would definitely fall. A single shot from the main cannon of the dragon's roar would be enough. Just like how regular soaring dragon ships were equipped with a large number of puppet soldiers, the Silver Dragon King was no different. There was probably a puppet king in there, and there might even be more than one. Coupled with the price of hiring the great cultivators of Moism, even large sects would not be able to afford it, let alone a single cultivator. Only a king's estate that ruled over an entire province possessed the strength, but they could only create a single one. Chapter 869. If the situation doesn't look good, we'll retreat. Li Qingshan called out to Little An secretly. Whoosh! He tried using the spirit turtle to sense around, but he could not sense any danger. However, he dared not be careless either. If the King of Southern Yu really was determined to eliminate them, he would definitely confuse the heavenly secrets. The Silver Dragon King slowly slowed down and stopped firmly in the sky above Giant Ship Island, casting a huge shadow over it. Everyone on the island stopped what they were doing and raised their heads. They could not help but hold their breaths. Li Qingshan suddenly raised an eyebrow. He sensed two extremely familiar auras. Why were they on the Silver Dragon King? Three figures descended from above. The one in the middle was an old man with a goatee dressed like a scholar. The most eye-catching part was the pair of curved goat horns on his head, clearly possessing the bloodline of demons. Mr. Ram's nickname, Ram, was actually true to his name. To the left and right of the head caretaker of the King of Southern Yu's estate were two people that Li Qingshan could not be more familiar with, the myriad poison ancestor and the masked Ruexian. This was different from the plan. However, at least they did not directly start fighting without saying anything. Ji Changfeng clearly let out a sigh of relief, and the merfolk queen lowered her eyes too. Yi Duanhai gazed at the myriad poison ancestor and frowned. Why had he become a ghost cultivator? Although their auras didn't weaken, and instead became stronger, this world was the Yang world, and ghost cultivators would be suppressed by nature. Therefore, even a world-famous sect like the mysterious Dark Sect would mainly control ghosts, and the cultivators would still retain their human bodies. The myriad poison ancestor shot a vicious glare back at him. Yi Duanhai looked away before exchanging glances with Yu Wufeng beside him. He thought about what he had said. Yu Wufeng had made it clear right from the beginning that he could not divulge Li Qingshan's secret because of the Blood Oath Scroll. He asked for his master's understanding, but he had repeatedly expressed one thing very clearly, which was to never become enemies with Li Qingshan. Yi Duanhai understood his disciple's temperament extremely well. He was not the type to nag, even if it was for his own life. Suddenly, an unbelievable thought occurred to him. Had the myriad poison ancestor's body been destroyed by Li Qingshan? That was far too unbelievable. Had the myriad poison ancestor spent all his years living like a dog? So be it if he could not take down Savage Mountain, but his body had been destroyed by a junior, forcing him to become a ghost cultivator. The biggest problem was, how could he endure this? Please investigate clearly, Master. Yu Wufeng had a lot of things he wanted to say, but he didn't dare to say a single one. He didn't even dare to give too obvious a hint. He was very tempted to tell Yi Duanhai that the myriad poison ancestor's body had not just been destroyed. Instead, he had been completely subdued by Li Qingshan. However, even if he said that, Yi Duanhai probably would not believe him. My apologies, I've made everyone wait for a long time. Originally, the timing was just right, but I heard that an imperial official was also coming. Oh, it's this senior myriad poisons beside me. His prestige has shaken the southern border for many years, so I don't need to introduce him. So I took a detour and missed the opportunity to welcome Her Majesty. It's really a sin. As soon as Mr. Ram landed on the platform, he apologized profusely. He behaved very humbly, even a little wretched. He did not possess the awe-inspiring bearing of the head caretaker of the King of Yu's estate at all. He was the complete opposite of Li Qingshan's high profile. Li Qingshan was forced to maintain a high profile. No matter how polite this Mr. Ram was, who would dare to look down on him? As the host, Ji Changfeng was as amiable as he could be. Let alone the King of Yu's estate, just the Silver Dragon King hovering in the air gave off a tremendous sense of deterrence. There was also the myriad poison ancestor, an imperial official of the king's estate. The myriad poison ancestor's eyes were half opened, and he clasped his hands casually in greeting. He stared at Li Qingshan resentfully as if he was ready to strike and kill him at any time. Li Qingshan sneered in disapproval before shifting his gaze and making his way over to Yi Duanhai's side. Pavilion Master Yi, your sword sure is a fine one. That was basically the same as, the weather is nice today. In the eyes of others, he was borrowing Yi Duanhai's influence to make the myriad poison ancestor afraid of acting recklessly. If it were not for his conversation with Yu Wufeng, Yi Duanhai would have believed that too. Now, he glanced at Li Qingshan deeply. I heard you also practice the path of the sword. This left the people in the surroundings greatly surprised. They never expected Yi Duanhai to respond. Sure enough, their successor was under someone else's control. Even someone as proud and aloof as Yi Duanhai could not be stubborn to the very end. As for those who thought further ahead, they believed the South Sea Sword Pavilion intended to work with Savage Mountain to fend off the great enemy that was the myriad poison cult. Sure enough, the myriad poison ancestor showed a hint of hesitation, holding back his urge to strike. Yu Wufeng roared inside, "Master, don't be fooled by their acting. They're together." Li Qingshan glanced at Ru Exan. She wore the gas mask she wore when refining poison and retreated behind the myriad poison ancestor, bowing like a disciple. She did not even glance at Li Qingshan the entire time. Li Qingshan and Yi Duanhai conversed a little absent-mindedly. Mr. Ram strode over and bowed with his hands clasped. "Ever since we parted in the Sword Pavilion, the Pavilion Master remains as graceful as ever. Congratulations. I wasn't a good host last time. You're welcome to visit the Sword Pavilion again, sir." Yi Duanhai also let go of his airs a little. "You're too kind." Of course, of course." Mr. Ram chatted a little more. He knew that Yi Duanhai did not like to talk, so he turned to Li Qingshan and said, "You must be someone who shakes up the South. You're such a genius at such a young age. You've really put us old coots to shame." His face was filled with undisguised admiration. It was clearly from the bottom of his heart. "You're too kind, sir." Li Qingshan returned the gesture politely. He could truly sense Ji Changfeng and Yi Duanhai's feelings. The king of Yu's estate was far too powerful. In the 10 millennia of history before Great Xia was founded, the Mist Province had always been a part of the kingdom of Yu. It had been passed down until now, so its heritage was just too deep. Even great cultivators and large sects were under its rule. The South Sea Sword Pavilion and the Cloud Sail sect were still on the South Sea after all, while Savage Mountain was truly under the king of Yu's rule. Even if his plan succeeded and he successfully took over Fire Melt Mountain, he would still need time to cultivate. If he fell out with the king of Yu's estate, he would not be able to defend it at all. All he could do was run back to the Green Province. Fortunately, this Mr. Ram was very good with his words. He did not make people feel like he was being oppressed by the king of Yu's estate. However, anyone with a rational mind could not ignore the existence of the king of Yu's estate behind him. Though, what exactly has he come for? Li Qingshan had a vague guess, but he was unable to verify it from Mr. Ram's expression. "Esteemed guests have gathered here today. This is an unprecedented event for our Cloud Sail sect. Please come with me to Cloud Sail Mountain to properly celebrate." The master of the Cloud Sail sect, Ji Changfeng, waved his hand, and a gentle breeze rose up from beneath everyone's feet. Apart from the people on the platform, there were also a few cultivators from the South Sea cultivation community. They were all at the second heavenly tribulation or above, which was why they had the right to attend the banquet in the main hall on Cloud Sail Mountain. The regular merfolk and cultivators had their own designated people to guide them, setting up banquets on Cloud Sail Mountain and Cloud Sail Mountain. Only after the banquet did the sea fair formally begin. Li Qingshan allowed the gentle breeze to drag him towards Cloud Sail Mountain. He arrived at the Philian Hall at the top of the mountain, and the seats had already been set up, waiting for everyone to take their seats. As the host, Ji Changfeng modestly declined slightly before sitting down in the seat of honor. Gong Yuan called herself the master of the South Sea, as well as half the host of this sea fair, so she sat on the same level as Ji Changfeng. The master of the Sword Pavilion and the myriad poison ancestor sat on the left and right, facing each other. However, the seats on the right were a little more honorable, so the myriad poison ancestor occupied them. Ji Changfeng was originally rather worried. Originally, he had arranged for Yi Duanhai to sit on the right and Mr. Ram to sit on the left. That would be the most suitable, and no one would be able to find fault with it. He never expected the myriad poison ancestor to appear out of nowhere and mess up his plans. However, seeing how Yi Duanhai had no objections, he stopped worrying. Further down, it was much simpler. Mr. Ram sat on the right without any modesty at all. No matter how great his background and organization were, his cultivation was still there. It was impossible for him to be more honorable than a great cultivator's seat. Politeness was politeness, but the king of Yu's estate was still much more powerful than Savage Mountain. Their cultivation was higher too. Li Qingshan did not think too much about it. He had never planned on sitting next to the myriad poison ancestor in the first place, so he sat right next to Yi Duanhai as a matter of course. Just like that, he set the tone of the banquet this time. The 6 of them were the most honorable, while the seats below were rather casual. However, there were people who were displeased, such as the golden core cultivator who sat in the 7th seat. He stared at Li Qingshan a few times, as if he was blaming Li Qingshan for stealing his seat. He was also a renowned sect leader. His sect was only second to the Cloud Sail sect in the cultivation community of the South Sea. He did not feel like Li Qingshan had the right to be seated higher than him. He was just a second heavenly tribulation cultivator. He had not even reached the peak of the South Sea. What king of savages was just a bluff? However, there were a few great cultivators present today, and Li Qingshan seemed to be chatting happily with them, so he did not stand out. Otherwise, if any of them found him displeasing to the eye, he would be in huge trouble. The banquet began very soon. Delicacies with a distinct flavor of the South Sea were served up like flowing water. None of them were seafood filled with spiritual qi, and there was even singing and dancing to liven things up. It was as graceful as the sounds of nature. Li Qingshan ate heartily. Just as he was eating happily, a gust of wind rushed over from behind. He raised an eyebrow, but he did not dodge, allowing a huge hand to strike his shoulder. Damned brat, don't forget that we still want to spar. Li Qingshan looked back and saw a large man in blue smiling at him with ill intentions. The man in blue stood over 9 feet tall. He was well-built, with a bulging stomach and a bulging chest. His upper body seemed particularly thick. If it were not for his simple, honest face, which was not vicious enough, he basically seemed like a mountain god from a temple. So it's Elder Blue. How did you transform? You don't even look human. Li Qingshan smiled as soon as he saw him. What does it have to do with you how I transform? You can't escape now. Elder Blue widened his eyes. Li Qingshan glanced at the merfolk queen nearby. Is she still going to test me? Whatever, I might as well follow the plan. With the King of Yu's estates supporting me, I have even less reason to fear Gong Yuan falling out with me. Chapter 870. You're right, Mr. Ram. Originally, I wanted to make arrangements, but ordinary people probably won't catch your eye. Now that the King of Savages has taken action, it really is for the best. Hee hee. Ji Changfeng immediately expressed his agreement. At the end, he could not help but laugh. The corner of Li Qingshan's lips twitched, and he replied, hee hee. Before he had even finished speaking, a red-faced old man below stood up. I've been the South Sea Sword Pavilion's cultivation method elder for many years. I've heard that the King of Savages is skilled in the way of the sword, so I'd like to ask for your guidance so that I can witness the supreme techniques of the Green Province. That's unfortunate. I've recently given up on the way of the sword and changed to the way of the spiked club. Li Qingshan laid out his hands. Even someone from the South Sea Sword Pavilion had jumped out. It was probably under the instructions of the master of the Sword Pavilion beside him. Yi Duanhai sensed Li Qingshan's gaze and turned around. He said indifferently, thank you, fellow. Referring to him as fellow was an extremely great acknowledgement, but the underlying meaning was that if he could not handle this round, he would not be worthy of this title. What right did he have to make a deal with him? That's unfortunate. I've already given up on the way of the sword. I don't want to use the sword anymore. During the 2 years that Ru Xian had been in secluded cultivation, Li Qingshan would take out the 2 clubs to play with whenever he had nothing to do. The more he played, the more he found Yin Qing's words to be reasonable. It was exactly because he accepted this setting that he found it rather interesting. The way of the sword really did not suit him. Oh. What a coincidence. The cultivation method elder stared at Li Qingshan. He did not believe him at all. His face was flushed, not only because he was tipsy, but also because he was excited from discovering his opponent's weakness. If Li Qingshan really had the strength, he would definitely agree to it right away. Now that he was actually trying to shirk the responsibility, he was clearly afraid. What a coincidence. I've already changed to the way of the spiked club, so I can't give you any guidance in the way of the sword. Li Qingshan casually grabbed an unknown fish and stuffed it into his mouth. He then gulped down a few mouthfuls of alcohol as he mumbled. Mace Dao. What kind of Dao is that? Kid, don't try to bluff. It doesn't matter if you don't use your sword, but you can't run away from us. Elder Blue's voice was as loud as thunder, shaking the entire table. Ha, as expected of the King of Savages. Your boldness is not something we can match. Most people, even if they knew that they were no match for their opponent, would still wait until they were defeated before reluctantly agreeing not to use their swords again. But to say that they would never use their swords again without waiting for their opponent to make a move, this is what a wise person would do. It can be said that you are in an invincible position. I admire you. The one who spoke was none other than the seventh seat. Even a fool could hear the sarcasm in his words, and it immediately caused a roar of laughter in the hall. It was as if they were of the same breath and branches, and even their thoughts were similar. We're all at the same cultivation level. You're so young, and you're even a dog of the imperial court. What right do you have to be above us? Daring to proclaim himself a king at this level, what a joke. I was almost fooled by you just now, but now I've finally exposed myself. To be able to sit in this main hall, which one of them was not a well-known figure for a long time? Which one of them did not have some pride? No matter how great Li Qingshan's renown was in the south, all he could hear about in the South Sea was an illusory legend. What you hear may be false, but what you see is true. Arrogance, suspicion, xenophobia, and an unspeakable jealousy. Under the influence of all these emotions, it would be strange if Li Qingshan could obtain their good impressions. When Li Qingshan was strong, he talked freely with the Mermaid Queen, ignored the Sword Pavilion Master, and showed off his abilities. Even the head butler of the Yu King's residence had to praise him. Who dared to take the initiative to provoke him? Now, these three all had the intention to test him, but he did not decisively accept their challenge. Once he showed a slight weakness, this hostility was immediately revealed. Sitting on the same level as these experts seemed to be incomparably glorious, but in reality, the tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. Dozens of pairs of eyes fell on Li Qingshan, all of them waiting to see him make a fool of himself. Mr. Ram sat opposite him, holding half a cup of wine in his mouth and smiling mysteriously. Hurry up and get up. I've been standing here for a long time. Elder Blue urged again. If you're tired of standing, then sit down. You won't be the first in line anyways. Li Qingshan said without turning his head. You. Elder Blue forcefully grabbed Li Qingshan's shoulder and almost made a move. But if he did that, it would not be a test and competition, but a direct confrontation, which went against the original intention. King of Savages already has an order in mind? Mr. Ram asked. He also felt strange. Since he was not willing to accept the Sword Pavilion Elder's challenge, his opponent could only be this whale demon. Also, what order was there to talk about? Yes. Li Qingshan held a pot of wine and stood up. Elder Blue felt an unstoppable force rise up. His huge, fan-like hand was actually unable to suppress it. However, he had wanted Li Qingshan to stand up and fight in the first place, so he did not forcefully suppress it. He let go and took a step back. Li Qingshan strolled to the front of the seventh seat and laughed. How about you count in as well? Although I don't cultivate the sword Dao, I can still use the mace Dao to give you some pointers. Sure, that's what I was thinking. Let me try out King of Savages means. The seventh seat was stunned. He did not expect that not only did he offend a few strong enemies, he even took the initiative to challenge him. Although his heart was beating like a drum, how could he show weakness in front of so many people? After hearing the word first, Li Qingshan turned his head and used his hand to point at the heads one by one, and you all count in. He casually pointed at almost everyone in the hall. Other than a few more experienced and prudent cultivators who just now did not laugh, everyone was counted in. Everyone's expression changed, especially the seventh seat. Li Qingshan clearly did not care about him. The hall suddenly went silent, and then everyone became excited. They all stood up to accept the challenge, and then they felt the same anger as the seventh seat. This was because Li Qingshan had already turned around. He did not waste a second to see their reaction, and pointed at Elder Blue, "You will be the last." Elder Blue's face immediately turned green. Li Qingshan even comforted him, "Don't worry, I can wait." The crowd mocked, undisguised mockery. He almost perfectly pulled everyone's hatred. Even Mr. Ram was greatly surprised. "All right, I will be the first. I'm afraid there is no need for a second fellow Taoist." The seventh seat suddenly stood up, the spiritual energy on his body surging, and a hook-shaped magic treasure was already in his hand. "Oh, no, you are not the first. Seeing that you are so enthusiastic, you will be the second. Come. The elder of cultivation methods over there, you are the first." Li Qingshan waved his left hand and beckoned at the elder of cultivation methods with his right. The seventh seat only felt anger attack his heart. He was almost tempted to slap Li Qingshan's face. The elder of cultivation methods' face became even redder. He held back his anger and stood up to enter the hall. "Didn't you say you don't use the sword anymore? It's not like I said I was going to guide you." Li Qingshan dodged to the side, revealing a graceful figure standing behind him. "Shaoan, give him some guidance on his sword style." Veins bulged on the elder of cultivation methods' forehead. Fortunately, he had trained his patience over many years of teaching disciples, which was why he did not erupt. Yi Duanhai nodded at the elder of cultivation methods. Li Qingshan had made so many opponents, so there was no longer a need for the sword pavilion to probe him. He could use this opportunity to probe the mysterious woman beside him. Don't underestimate her just because she's young. Her path of the sword completely surpasses mine. Li Qingshan pressed against Little N's shoulder and smiled at the elder of cultivation methods. "It's the same for everyone. Come." The elder of cultivation methods said coldly. Afterwards, Little N's indifferent reply almost drove him mad. "I don't have a sword." Pfft. Cough, 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 then what do I do? "I'll find one for you." Li Qingshan gave Little N a thumbs up inside. "Good girl, you've already inherited my legacy." Little N did not say that completely to help Li Qingshan anger. She had spent almost a year and used 30,000 bone-eating shamans as materials to refine the Buddha-slaying sword to a brand new level. It could rival the famed swords of the Sword Collection Palace, but it was inconvenient for her to take it out. Behind the bronze mask, she blinked and glanced around the hall. She said, "There's no need." Afterwards, she made her way to the corner of the hall. A peach tree was planted in a large flower pot. The peach blossoms were in full bloom, giving off an intoxicating fragrance. She extended her hand and snapped off a section. The twisted peach branch was around 2 feet long, with a few pink, tender peach blossoms on it. With a gentle breeze, they almost drifted away. She walked back. "It's done." Chapter 871. At the very least, the elder of cultivation methods was quite angered. The corner of his eye twitched, and his face reddened. He had been immersed in the Tao for 4 centuries. So be it if a little girl who was less than a tenth of his age wanted to compete with him, but she did not even use a sword. What is this? This is an undisguised insult. The hall fell into an uproar. The cultivators all looked at one another, almost doubting their ears. Ji Changfeng thought to himself, as expected of 2 people who hang out together. Even their arrogance is the same. Yi Duanhai's expression became slightly colder as well. He said to Li Qingshan, "Are you serious? Although it's a competition, if we really fight, I'm afraid swords and blades will be blind, and you'll end up injuring this little friend." A competition. Isn't it guidance? I don't have a sword in my hand, but I have a sword in my heart. Elder over there, are you afraid? Li Qingshan never expected little N to do something like this. He could not help but sigh inside. Sure enough, the student surpasses the master, the new generation surpasses the old, I'm already old, and so on. However, he did not worry for little N at all. This girl was even more meticulous than him. Since she was bold enough to do something like this, she had absolute confidence. Only mortals would believe that. Even the slightly more experienced people of the Jianghu would not believe that, let alone the great swordsman Yi Duanhai. Unless the difference in strength between the two sides was too great, the effect of a divine weapon was absolutely decisive. Cultivation was not useless, but when it came to actual combat, it was still a battle of strength. If an old monk who had studied the Buddhist Dharma for his entire life did not cultivate, all he could do was pray to the Buddha to keep the tiger from hunger if he encountered a tiger. She was using a peach branch as a sword against a true treasured sword. And, the owner of the treasured sword was a sword cultivator who had undergone the second heavenly tribulation and condensed a sword embryo. She seemed like she was looking to die no matter how she looked at it. Afraid? I don't even know how to write that word. The elder of cultivation method's eyes shone with cold light. The temperature in the entire hall plummeted. I can teach you. Little N's voice remained as calm and emotionless as before, as if she really believed the elder of cultivation methods did not know how to write. Sharp-tongued girl, cut the nonsense. How about I witness the sword style of the Chan monastery of Devanaga? The long sword was unsheathed, and a purple light illuminated the entire hall, accompanied by the low rumbling of thunder. This sword is 3 feet, 7 inches, and 5 fun. It is named Violet Lightning. The technique imparting elder's robes fluttered even though there was no wind. Arcs of electricity coiled around his body as he held his sword horizontally in front of his chest with his right hand. His left hand brushed across the blade of the sword, causing electricity to surge between his hand and the blade of the sword. In an instant, he seemed to have become a completely different person. He was calm and composed without a trace of anger, just like the sword in his hand. This is not a sword, but a branch of peach blossom. Little N replied calmly. Compared to the elder of technique imparting elder's magnificent aura, she did not have any aura at all. It was as if she had already fallen into a disadvantageous position even before she had attacked. Sword chi surged, and lightning was about to strike. Her figure became more and more delicate. Only his right hand, which was holding the peach branch, glowed with a faint golden light. If one did not look carefully, they would almost miss it. However, no matter how hostile the people present were, they still possessed some insight. They could all tell that the Buddhist light was extraordinary. Mr. Ram thought, her Buddhist cultivation method really is profound. Across the entire South Sea, there probably isn't a single Buddhist disciple who can rival her apart from the mysterious divine nun of the South Sea. It's just a pity that this is a competition of the sword. If her strength far exceeds her opponent, then so be it, but this elder of the sword pavilion is already at the peak of the second heavenly tribulation. Apart from the few people above, no one can claim to possess a higher cultivation than him. I'll ask you one last time. Are you really not going to change your sword? The elder of technique imparting elder stood with his sword. The electricity blazed even more intensely, producing a hissing sound. He no longer seemed to hold a sword in his hand, but a bolt of lightning plucked from the sky. It twisted and trembled as if it could break free from his hand at any time and kill his opponent instantly. Everyone could tell that once he struck, it would definitely be an earth-shaking strike of lightning. Perhaps he would not even need a second strike to determine victory. Little N said nothing. She shook her head gently. In that moment, the elder of technique imparting elder vanished. Only a bolt of violet lightning remained in the hall. He had become one with his sword, and the lightning sword chi he had accumulated for a very long time erupted instantly, but there was only a flash of lightning. The violet lightning was as thin as a snake, twisting and turning. It was unpredictable, but it was also extremely fast. There were not many people in the hall who could see the purple lightning clearly. The blazing lightning and the roaring thunder caused the weaker cultivators to be unable to see or hear. They were shocked. If the target of this sword was me, wouldn't I be dead for sure? Even the more powerful cultivators became stern. I never thought the elder of technique imparting elder would actually be so impressive. It's not without reason that the South Sea Sword Pavilion has always looked down on the cultivation community of the South Sea. The combination of a sword cultivator and a treasured sword is far too terrifying. It's basically unstoppable and unstoppable. Even 7th Seat felt that the reason the elder of technique imparting elder was willing to sit below him was because he did not care much about his reputation. Otherwise, he really would have to give up his seat. The rumbling only subsided after a very long time. Little Anne remained where she was. The peach branch drooped beside her, scattering the peach blossoms. It was as if she could not even swing her sword in time to block the strike. She wore a mask, so no one could see her expression. The elder of technique imparting elder stood 10 steps away with his back towards her. His expression was stern as he slowly sheathed the violet lightning sword. The outcome had been determined. That was what all the cultivators thought. Although most of them did not even see the strike clearly, it did not stop them from evaluating the outcome of the battle. In the end, it was 7th Seat who sensed that something was amiss, as Yi Duanhai, who had always been solemn and expressionless, was actually stunned. His cup of alcohol stopped by his mouth just like that. Ji Changfeng and Gong Yuan both looked at Little Anne in surprise. They did not look at the elder of technique imparting elder who was even closer. Only Mr. Ram looked at the elder of technique imparting elder's face. His expression was also one of surprise. The elder of technique imparting elder's back trembled slightly. His breathing became rather disorderly. As for the detestable Li Qingshan, he stood with his arms crossed. His smile became even more detestable. Li Qingshan, how can you still smile? It'll be our turn once they're done. I definitely won't be the last. I'll fight you first. Elder Blue glared at Li Qingshan. Alright, I've already given you guidance on the path of the sword. You're next. Li Qingshan said. You're still talking about guidance? Are you out of your mind? Just now, if it weren't for the fact that this old man showed mercy, this girl would be dead already. Elder Blue pointed at his own eyes, expressing that he had seen it very clearly. You know, with your age, it's impossible for you to possess such a path of the sword. The elder of technique imparting elder suddenly turned around. His expression was both excited and haggard, as if he had aged a decade in that instant. His face was extremely pale, making the faint red dot on his forehead stand out. It was obviously not from him. Ah! If that's the case, that doesn't make sense. The old man was one with the sword earlier. He didn't even show his head. Elder Blue was stunned. He did see Little Anne swing the peach branch, but compared to the violet lightning, it was far too slow. Little Anne adjusted her mask and said nothing. Apart from Li Qingshan, she had never liked talking nonsense with others. She directly practiced silent meditation in the Chan monastery of Devanaga, so she did not want to explain anything right now either. Li Qingshan smiled. I've already said I don't have a sword in my hand, but I have a sword in my heart. Do you believe me now? I'm not using a real sword because I have no grievances with you. I just don't want to take your life. No one knew that he was actually telling the truth. However, this was not a victory of cultivation. Little Anne might be a talented prodigy, but she was not a sword cultivator after all. No matter how powerful her swordsmanship was, it was impossible for her to surpass the elder of technique imparting elder who had immersed himself in the path of the sword for 4 centuries. This was a victory of strength. Although she only had a peach branch in her hand, there was sword chi that contained the 5 absolutes immortal's profound path of the sword in her heart. In the moment they clashed, she had used the path of white bone and great beauty, going from life to death, from color to emptiness. As a result, the elder of technique imparting elder's sure-kill strike lost its target. His heart of the sword was like a blind man. She used this state to completely unleash the 5 absolutes immortal's path of the sword. It was almost like the 5 absolutes immortal had possessed her. If it were a regular person, such as Li Qingshan, they would not be able to unleash it to such a level even if they refined the 3 absolutes calligraphy. The elder of technique imparting elder had immersed himself in the path of the sword for 4 centuries, but compared to a legendary figure like her, he was still worlds apart. It was impossible for the sword chi she had nurtured with the 3 absolutes calligraphy for so long to be weaker than a regular strike from him. To put it bluntly, this was the path of white bone and great beauty crushing the sword pavilion's cultivation method, and the 3 absolutes calligraphy crushing the violet lightning sword. The peach branch was purely to help Li Qingshan infuriate him. She could win even if she was empty-handed. The elder of technique imparting elder's defeat was completely justified. With that, let alone the elder of technique imparting elder, even Ji Changfeng, Gong Yuan, and Yi Duanhai were shocked. The king of savages had been in the limelight for far too long. It was very easy for the woman who followed him silently to be overlooked. Even with her alluring beauty and reputation as a genius, it was unavoidable for others to look down on her once she was willing to serve as a foil to someone else. However, at that moment, no one dared to look down on her anymore. Even the people above were not confident that they could definitely receive that strike. In particular, Yi Duanhai understood the significance of that strike the most as a great sword master. Even if he struck out with his full strength, the power of that strike would only be so. Moreover, she had only used a peach branch. What would happen if she used a treasured sword as well? They all knew there were many prodigies in the world, but a prodigy who could even ignore major realms of cultivation was far too exaggerated. In this aspect, they had actually underestimated Little N's strength. Due to the wonders of the path of white bone and great beauty and the uniqueness of the 3 absolutes calligraphy, none of them could tell that Little N had used an arcane treasure, and it was an extremely powerful arcane treasure at that. They thought it was Little N's own strength. Actually, that was all Little N could unleash. If she faced a great cultivator directly, even if she used the Buddha slaying sword, she would not be able to kill them in a single stroke. However, while it was a miscalculation, it was not an overestimation. She had not killed the 100,000 bone-eating shamans for nothing. If she had unleashed her true strength, she could have easily defeated an opponent like the elder of technique imparting elder. Chapter 872. Little N returned to the corner of the hall and reattached the branch of peach blossoms into the distance. In that moment, green buds sprouted from the branch again, blossoming into peach blossoms. They shone brilliantly, even more than before. This move was basically even more surprising to Ji Changfeng and the others than the strike just now. Just how fragile was the branch? Using it as a sword to unleash such a magnificent strike had already completely severed its vitality. When its aura dispersed, it should have been reduced to dust immediately. Yet, she was actually able to reattach it, allowing it to sprout and bloom again. Who knew how many times more difficult this was than reviving a withered tree? It was basically resurrecting the dead. Little N gazed at the blossoming peach blossoms on the branch for a while before turning around and returning to Li Qingshan's side. The past 2 years had not gone to waste. She had gained a deeper comprehension of the path of white bone and great beauty. She was already close to the 3rd layer. You've worked hard. Li Qingshan poured her a cup of alcohol with a smile and massaged her shoulders. He seemed very attentive. It left the jaws of the cultivators who had just witnessed his arrogance dumbfounded. Was the king of savages just a label, and he actually relied on this mysterious woman, little N, to live off her? Even Yi Duanhai had the same doubts. Was this little N a reincarnated celestial? Otherwise, it was impossible for her to possess a path of the sword like that at her age. If that was the case, many things could be explained. With a path of the sword like that and her ability to instantly conceal her aura just now, she only needed a treasured sword to launch a sneak attack when he least expected it, and it would not be strange for the myriad poison ancestor's body to be destroyed. As for Wu Feng, his defeat was just too obvious. However, what Yi Duanhai did not know was that when she fought the myriad poison ancestor back then, little N had yet to obtain the three absolutes calligraphy. Her comprehension of the path of white bone and great beauty was not that deep either, or there really was no need for her to hunt him down. Little N lifted her bronze mask slightly, revealing her vermilion lips that curved into a smile. She drank the alcohol Li Qingshan had given her. When she was expressionless, she possessed a beauty that could topple the world. When she drank wine with a smile, although only half of her face was revealed, it caused the hearts of many cultivators in the hall to tremble. I couldn't tell that this little sister is not only a beauty but also has such skills. Li Xiao, you are really lucky. I think you should give up your title of King of Savages to her. The Merfolk Queen suddenly said. She had only wanted to test Li Qingshan and did not pay much attention to little Anne. She did not expect that her test would produce such a shocking result. Hence, she changed the topic and tried to test the relationship between the two of them. They couldn't possibly be lovers, right? The Chan monastery of Devanaga was a renowned holy land of Buddhism after all. Were they supposed to be so open-minded? However, if he was a man, he would also be tempted by such a woman, and Li Qingshan was obviously not a person who liked to suppress himself. Under all kinds of reasonable inferences, the more he thought about it, the more he couldn't figure out their relationship. That's obviously my good fortune, but it's not nice to be called the king of savages by a girl. Li Qingshan helped Little and put on her mask. Little and glanced at Gong Yuan. Gong Yuan immediately sensed it. She actually felt a hint of fear. As a woman, she knew that most women held grudges, and their thoughts were unpredictable. After witnessing that strike, she was reluctant to incite hostility from a woman like that for some baffling reason, so she said, I see. At the very least, there was one thing that she could be certain of. Little and valued her relationship with Li Qingshan very much. However, Li Qingshan's behavior made her feel rather contemptuous. Little and had already done so much for him, yet he still cared about the title of King of Savages. However, all men in the world were like that. They valued their reputation even more than their lives, so there was nothing strange about that. Actually, Li Qingshan did not sense her instigation at all. Shaking up the world had always been a man's ambition, and he was no exception. However, let alone the fact that the title of King of Savages was absolutely nothing on his path to the 9 heavens, no matter how important it was, it definitely could not reach the level where it could be mentioned in the same breath as Little Anne. As for Little Anne, not only did she have no concept of fame and fortune, but she did not even have the concept of giving anything. Their thoughts differed from those of ordinary people in many aspects, which made their relationship even more difficult for outsiders to understand. Fascinating. That's far too fascinating. The King of Savages sure has many hidden talents under his command. It's amazing. Mr. Ram clapped his hands and praised. His cultivation was not low, but it was not high enough for him to see through the mysteries of Little N's strike. Only after communicating with the myriad poison ancestor beside him did he understand what the strike meant. He was greatly shocked. His Majesty, the King of Yu, has been drawn away too much by this Li Qingshan. I never thought this woman would actually be the big fish. If someone like her returns to the Green Province and becomes enemies with the Mist Province again, it'll be terrible. However, I refuse to believe there really isn't any discord between the two of them. Since ancient times, it has been the hardest for geniuses to get along with one another. Perhaps I can split them apart. No wonder you've given up on the path of the sword. Yi Duanhai downed the cup of alcohol by his mouth. The elder of cultivation methods had been defeated in a single stroke. Not only had it humiliated him, but it also made him feel threatened. Perhaps he would be forced to swallow his pride and sit down to make a deal with Li Qingshan, so he went along with Gong Yuan and Mr. Ram's conversation. No matter how stupid Li Qingshan was, he could tell that every single one of them was trying to drive a wedge between them. Although it was absolutely impossible for him to fall for it, it still made him feel disgusted. Just now, he had been provoked by Seventh Seat and mocked by the cultivators of the South Sea. His reaction seemed intense, but it was actually just out of interest. He did not take it seriously at all. However, he had a sore spot too. Hee, that's part of the reason. However, this elder of cultivation methods under Pavilion Master Ye's tutelage better not give up on the path of the sword like me after just a few pointers. If I make the disciples of the South Sea Sword Pavilion give up on the path of the sword too, then I'll be committing a grave sin. Oh right, Mr. Ram, I wonder what was so interesting about that strike earlier. Did you see it clearly? And, Your Majesty, the word beauty doesn't really suit little Anne. You better keep it to yourself. With that, Yi Duanhai looked down. Killing people in a fit of rage had always been the duty of a sword cultivator. Gong Yuan's eyes turned cold. How could the dignity of the queen be offended in the slightest? Mr. Ram was still smiling, but it was slightly unnatural. His modesty was established on the basis that no one dared to show him any displeasure. As the head caretaker of the King of Yu's estate, he was no kind person. The atmosphere in the hall immediately froze. The cultivators of the South Sea suddenly realized that as it turned out, Li Qingshan had not been particularly arrogant earlier. He was not exactly provoking them either. Now, this was arrogance, this was provocation. From the beginning until now, I've never purposefully caused any trouble. You can say that I've shown you respect. You're just seeing that I haven't undergone the third heavenly tribulation. If you want to test me, then test me. Don't be so underhanded and ruin your reputation. Li Qingshan had never liked scheming and putting on airs in the first place. It was only because of the spirit turtle's influence that he had feigned civility with them for so long. Now that he had been provoked like that, he might as well just expose the truth. At worst, he would just fall out with them. He just happened to have broken through to the 5th layer of the tiger demon. Coupled with Little Anne and the myriad poison ancestor, he could guarantee that there would be less than a handful of people who could make it out of the hall alive. Chapter 873. The smile that had been hanging on his face the entire time vanished. His face sank slightly. It was just one. It was just a simple change in expression, but it was like a vicious demon had ripped off its disguise, replaced by ruthlessness. Originally, the impression he gave off was that of gallantry, but that was only a description for humans. The tiger demon did not have the so-called gallantry, only brutality and bloodthirstiness, grinding its teeth and sucking blood, going on a rampage to eat people. Just like how the subject had to die when the master was humiliated, the merfolk and elders of the sword pavilion all stood up when they saw how the queen and the pavilion master had been provoked. They were just about to go up and berate Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed slightly. Scarlet light flashed, glancing past their faces. They were tongue-tied and immediately felt fear, as if they were about to be killed on the spot in the next moment. They retreated instinctively and assumed a defensive posture. The group of people all stood up at the same time before shrinking back. Although they immediately returned to their senses, their presences had already been completely overwhelmed. Their furious words of rebuke became stuck in their throats. They were rendered speechless. Li Qingshan did not use any abilities, but the tiger demon had already merged with his blood and soul. His movements and stillness, his anger and laughter, all appeared. What a heavy evil aura! Mr. Ram shivered inside. Although he had life-saving arcane treasures on him, he did not feel safe at all. He subconsciously glanced at the myriad poison ancestor beside him. You really are a boorish man with a death wish. Humiliating those cultivators of the South Sea is nothing, but do you really think the few of us are people you can provoke? Let alone the fact that we've been very vague, even if we're trying to sow discord in the open, you'll have to endure it. If you don't, you'll die. But perhaps this is an opportunity. He already has a grievance with the myriad poison ancestor, and now he's fallen out with the master of the sword pavilion and the merfolk queen. Does he really have 3 heads and 6 arms? Why don't we just give up on the original plan and put him to death? As the head caretaker of the king of Southern Yu's estate, no matter where he went in the Mist Province, Mr. Ram would show him some respect. Even great cultivators had to be polite to him. He had already forgotten just how many years it had been since someone had mocked him to his face like this. He could not help but make up his mind to hide his sliver of fear. He had always been a person who planned things out before taking action. He never thought Li Qingshan would be so unwise. He weighed his words and considered the pros and cons inside, struggling to make up his mind. What a brute! Gong Yuan sneered. Since she was a woman, it was impossible for her to not care about her appearance. Li Qingshan had asked her to keep the word beauty for herself. It could be said that he had hit the nail on the head, making her very uncomfortable. What was even more unbearable was that her dignity as a ruler had been offended. From ancient times until now, the dignity of those in power was the most fragile. A single wrong word was disrespect. Directly calling someone by their name was treason. Even their name had to be avoided. When an ordinary man is enraged, blood will be splashed 5 steps away. Li Qingshan turned his head and glanced at the merfolk queen from the corner of his eyes. A lack of forbearance in small matters would spoil great plans. In order to maximize benefits, forbearance was necessary. Compared to the ox demon's stubbornness and the tiger demon's bloodthirst and warlike nature, the spirit turtle's calmness and intelligence were the best ways to seek fortune and avoid disaster. He understood all of this. However, understanding didn't mean that he was willing to do it. If life was full of schemes and only did the right thing, what was the point? Sometimes, he just couldn't bear it and didn't want to retreat. So what if he was wrong? Alright, let's see how you're going to bleed. I've shown you some respect, and you really think you're the king of savages. Elder Blue, teach him a lesson. Gong Yuan immediately became as deep as an abyss. She had always rejected and detested humans. Originally, she had reluctantly accepted Li Qingshan as her equal out of curiosity, so she had already accumulated some dissatisfaction. Now that she saw how he did not know what was good for him and actually thought he was someone important, she immediately erupted. If he were a regular person, perhaps she would just teach him a lesson. However, a genius like that had to be killed once they became enemies. Elder Blue hesitated. His huge hand reached towards Li Qingshan's shoulder. Li Qingshan suddenly looked back. He did not dodge at all. Do you really want to be the second one? Of course. Elder Blue's heart tightened. He already knew that Li Qingshan's ability was very weak. However, he didn't expect that when it came to an enemy, he would give him such a huge pressure. He couldn't help but think of a sentence that Li Qingshan once said, "Some people, if you don't step on their heads, they won't know how to treat you as a human." Elder Blue pressed both of his huge palms on Li Qingshan's shoulders. He smiled. This place is too small. Little rascal, let's go out and fight. He said telepathically. Don't be stubborn. It's not worth it for a sentence like that. Although the two of them bickered a lot, he didn't hate Li Qingshan. Instead, he felt a little admiration. Otherwise, he wouldn't have allowed Li Qingshan to sit on his head until they reached the harbor. He was thousands of years old. Although the mermaid queen was strong, she was still a little girl in his eyes. He didn't think that Li Qingshan deserved to die just because he offended her with one sentence. You're not bad. You can leave now. Li Qingshan looked deeply at Elder Blue and loosened his right fist slightly. Elder Blue had no idea that he had walked on the edge of life and death. If he had really listened to Gong Yuan's order to teach Li Qingshan a lesson, Li Qingshan no longer planned to hold back. Although he had a good impression of him, since they were standing on the opposite side, he could only kill. He was both relieved and a little regretful. The tiger demon's killing intent boiled like fire. It made him feel hot all over. This was the feeling he liked the most. Elder Blue was secretly anxious. He wanted to use force to drag Li Qingshan out, but he was shocked. This 7-foot body was like a mountain, not moving an inch. This is impossible. His strength is far above mine. Then, Li Qingshan said to the cultivators of the South Sea, just now, the people I haven't chosen can leave as well. Perhaps the spirit turtle's perfect plan did not suit him at all. Wanting to reach a certain level of strength before exposing his identity as the North Moon and fighting the Dragon King of the Sea was far too conservative. Whatever, I can't think too much about it. I'll just use these guys as practice for now. Without any surprise, Little An removed his bronze mask and stood beside him quietly. Everyone in the hall shivered inside when they heard Li Qingshan's words. What was he trying to do? Regular people would definitely be thinking about how to flee and avoid her wrath when they spoke rudely and angered the Mermaid Queen. Yet, he seemed determined to remain here. Gong Yuan frowned heavily. For some reason, she felt a hint of fear. My king, please reconsider. Yu Wufeng blocked Li Qingshan's way. Apologies, there's no wind. Looks like I'll have to go back on my word. Li Qingshan smiled again, but it was completely different from just now. It seemed much more sincere, giving off a sense of joy from the bottom of his heart. If he killed any elder or disciple of the South Sea Sword Pavilion today, he would develop irreconcilable grievances with Yu Wufeng. He obviously would not act pretentiously or care about his promise. He would let Yu Wufeng undergo the third heavenly tribulation before seeking revenge. That's just a small matter. It's not worth mentioning. However, those who achieve great things do not bother with trifles. My king, please focus on the great things. Yu Wufeng tried to persuade Li Qingshan as he cast a pleading gaze at Yi Duanhai. What he feared the most was not his own safety, but the entire South Sea Sword Pavilion falling into danger because of him. Chapter 874. Mount Cloud Mast stood above the surging waves. Before they knew it, the clouds had become connected, shrouding the vast starry sky. They weighed down on the mountain heavily, as if they were about to touch the roof of the Phylian Hall at the very top. The Silver Dragon King hovering in the air was vaguely visible in the sea of clouds. A storm was brewing, and the world was dusky. The gale swept the soybean-sized droplets of rain into the Phylian Hall. The noble, scattered chandeliers illuminated the large, empty hall like it was daytime, pressing down on everyone's shadows beneath their feet. On the mural behind Gong Yuan and Ji Changfeng, the legendary god of wind, Phylian, gazed down at the surprised and stunned faces. For a moment, there was only the sound of wind and rain. With a rumble of thunder, the elder of cultivation method's shadow used the even brighter lightning to escape from beneath his feet, arriving before Little An. Everyone's gazes gathered on Yi Duanhai. What was the meaning of this? Was it his idea? Surely he wasn't giving in, right? Yi Duanhai continued to hug the ancient sword as he stared at Li Qingshan with a frown. Suddenly, he stood up and slowly made his way towards Li Qingshan. A mortal swordsman could kill with 10 steps. So what if he was a great sword cultivator? Let alone 5 steps, 3 steps, and 1 step. The sea-splitting sword thrummed. Sword intent condensed like it was tangible. With each step, even the ocean parted to the side. However, Li Qingshan did not retreat. He stared at Yi Duanhai with his head held high, like a pillar of support. Faced with the great sword cultivator's threat step by step, his battle intent did not weaken at all. Instead, it skyrocketed, rushing out of the hall and into the clouds. Yi Duanhai stopped. The gazes of the two equally tall men clashed. Time seemed to come to a standstill. Their auras condensed without erupting. Everyone held their breaths as if a boulder was weighing down on their chests. The thrumming of the sword immediately stopped. He clenched his right hand into a fist. Yi Duanhai pressed down on the hilt of his sword. Li Qingshan frowned, but he instead loosened his fist. Yi Duanhai then opened his eyes. You've won this competition. You've won. After you've eaten and drunk your fill, we'll talk in private. Without waiting for Li Qingshan's response, he came to the side of the cultivation imparting elder and patted his shoulder. Then, he walked out of the hall, facing the wind and rain without looking back. His back view was a little bleak, and the elders and disciples of the Sword Pavilion followed closely behind him. Everyone found it hard to believe that the Sword Pavilion's master, who was famous for his unyielding and decisive temperament, was actually a Sword Pavilion master. Facing a junior who hadn't even undergone 3 heavenly tribulations, he was actually forced to retreat in a head-on confrontation. Yu Wufeng let out a long sigh. He was both relieved and sighed. Master, I'm not sure. It's Windless who let you down. Killing in a fit of rage was the duty of a sword cultivator, but Yi Duanhai was not alone. He was also the pavilion master of the South Sea Sword Pavilion. He needed to consider the bigger picture and the entire sect, so he was unable to swing his sword in the end. When Li Qingshan didn't want to care about the big picture, someone else did. Hee. Just now, we're just joking. Why do you have to be so serious? If I have offended you in any way, please forgive me. I will punish myself with a cup of wine as an apology to you. Mr. Ram stood up with a smile. He picked up his cup and drank it all in one gulp. Sect Master Ji, I can't handle alcohol. I'll be going to rest first. Suddenly, he seemed to remember something. Oh right, His Majesty, the King of You, knows the King of Savages is a wine lover. He specially made me bring a jar of fine alcohol this time. Even I covet it very much. I'll be basking in his glory tomorrow. Before Ji Changfeng could stand up and see him off, he strode off. The myriad poison ancestor caught up with him and walked beside him, while Ru Xian followed behind. Everyone was dumbfounded. The head caretaker of the King of Southern Yu's estate had actually taken the initiative to apologize. Was he different from what they had imagined? Was this Mr. Ram really a good person who was as good as he seemed? Yi Duanhai's decision to back out was understandable. After all, his beloved disciple was in his hands, but what was Mr. Ram afraid of? Was he afraid Li Qingshan would suddenly attack him? The Silver Dragon King was right in the air, and the myriad poison ancestor was right beside him. Who could harm him? Not to mention, didn't the myriad poison ancestor have a deep grievance with Li Qingshan? Let alone them, even Ji Changfeng was greatly surprised. The King of Southern Yu has taken the initiative to give him alcohol to express his goodwill. Just what are Li Qingshan's origins? Why does he have such great prestige? Don't tell me the head caretaker of the estate's main objective this time is Li Qingshan. Otherwise, why would he put up with this? He had no idea that Li Qingshan had once gifted the King of Southern Yu a jar of alcohol. He was merely returning the favor. All he knew was that he could not drink the alcohol. Mr. Ram crossed the door sill and actually felt his body lighten. He could not help but glance back. Li Qingshan was also looking at him with some pity. He clasped his hands with a smile and glanced past the myriad poison ancestor. His heart sank. Just now, he had already made up his mind. He wanted to destroy the 2 geniuses of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, Li Qingshan and Little An, in the Philian Hall, and he could use this opportunity to suppress the cultivation community of the South Sea. Right when he was about to communicate with the myriad poison ancestor beside him, he suddenly sensed something amiss. The myriad poison ancestor had behaved far too calmly. Li Qingshan had almost destroyed the myriad poison cult after all. Ever since the myriad poison ancestor entered the Hylian Hall, he had actually not said anything about this irreconcilable grievance at all. Even when Li Qingshan provoked everyone, he did not say a single word against Li Qingshan. If the myriad poison ancestor were a person of deep emotions, then so be it, but he just happened to be renowned for his narrow-mindedness. There was definitely something wrong when something was out of the ordinary. An unpredictable change had happened to the person he relied on the most for this trip, which made Mr. Ram very uneasy. He no longer communicated with the myriad poison ancestor. Instead, he carefully observed his reaction. When Yi Duanhai retreated with his disciples, the myriad poison ancestor showed no intentions of doing anything either. Mr. Ram could clearly sense a hint of danger, so he immediately decided to give up on this opportunity and hold it in, returning the matter to its original trajectory. When Li Qingshan no longer wanted to hold it in, someone chose to hold it in. Cough cough, Sect Master Ji, about that. I'll be taking my leave as well. I've drunk too much today and said some nonsense. I've really made a fool of myself. Ha, please forgive me. Seventh Seat smiled, but his smile was rather unnatural. A moment ago, he was so high-spirited that he wanted to fight Li Qingshan to the death, but now, it was like that did not exist at all. He cursed himself inside. God damn it, it's just a seat. Only if I'm crazy would I get involved in this mess. When those important figures fight, what does it have to do with me? I cultivate in the South Sea precisely because I don't want to get involved in these battles. Can't I just watch the show properly? Why did I have to jump out myself? Even the king of Southern Yu has to show respect to that kid Li Qingshan, so why should I be angry with him? If we really do fight, just that woman called Little and will swing her sword over. I'll struggle to block her. Sigh, I can't hold my liquor either, so I'll be taking my leave first. Please forgive me, Sect Master Ji. The cultivators who had been singled out by Li Qingshan had already felt like they were sitting on pins and needles. With Seventh Seat taking the lead, they all stood up and bid farewell. The light in their eyes flickered as their gazes basically moved past Li Qingshan. Some of them even lowered their heads and looked at their toes. Stop right there. Li Qingshan called out. Don't go overboard. This is the Cloud Sail sect. This is the South Sea, not your savage mountain. Seventh Seat shuddered and turned around. His expression was extremely ugly. Some of the other cultivators stopped, while others just made their way out with their heads lowered. They even sped up a little. When the people who had stopped saw this, they gritted their teeth and followed him in a hurry. They thought to themselves, he might not necessarily be calling for me. No matter how powerful you, Li Qingshan, are, you can't make me stop just because you want me to. The more you make me stop, the more I want to leave. Swish. 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 Over a dozen streaks of light flew out of the Hylian Hall. Gazing at the sky covered in dark clouds, their moods immediately lightened up. Not only am I leaving, but I'm also leaving. What can you do to me if I walk out? Fortunately, you're not calling for me. Some of them glanced back at Seventh Seat and said, good luck. Some of them did not even look back. They even grumbled inside, if it weren't for your nonsense, we wouldn't have been dragged into this. Why did we have to provoke this king of savages for no reason? Cultivating in the South Sea is about peace. You're also the leader of a sect, yet you don't even understand that. Regardless of whether they looked back or not, they did not slow down at all. The group of people vanished into the curtain of rain very soon, only leaving Seventh Seat standing there facing Li Qingshan. His expression became uglier and uglier, and he was filled with regret. Why did I stop? Fellow Li, when it's possible to forgive, one should forgive. Ji Changfeng said. Seventh Seat glanced at Ji Changfeng gratefully. It was not that he was afraid of death. If a great enemy truly stood before them, he would not hesitate to fight to the death. He just did not want to die for some random reason. He had said something too rash. This feeling was like touching a tiger's butt for no reason, only to end up being eaten by the tiger. Such a stupid way of dying would probably make him the laughingstock of the entire South Sea cultivation community. Just looking at his slightly bitter face, Li Qingshan felt like he was going to turn his stomach. What was the point of killing someone like that? He was very surprised that the matter had developed to this point. Originally, he was prepared to fight to the death, but he never thought Yi Duanhai and Mr. Ram would actually give in. It was not like he had any deep grievances with the South Sea Sword Pavilion or the King of Yu's estate. They had already admitted defeat and apologized, so there was no reason for him to cling onto it and fight them to the death. However, there was still a big fish. Li Qingshan turned around. Gong Yuan, what do you think of my anger? The Merfolk Queen's expression wavered. If Li Qingshan had been bold enough to call her name so rudely a moment ago, she definitely would have taught him a lesson. Yet now, as she gazed at the hall that had suddenly emptied out and the figure that, seventh seat, had flown out of the hall like he was fleeing, she was actually speechless for a moment. Even the Merfolk elders felt uneasy. They no longer dared to casually scold the man before them. Ji Changfeng opened his mouth, but he said nothing. He could persuade Li Qingshan to spare someone who had nothing to do with him, but when it came to the Merfolk Queen, he could only let them deal with it themselves, just in case they offended either side. Yi Duanhai could admit defeat for the sake of his disciple, and Mr. Ram could apologize for the sake of his safety, but Gong Yuan could not swallow her pride. Just now, she could still fall out with Li Qingshan without any hesitation, but right now, she was unable to make that decision. Let alone just how much strength Li Qingshan was hiding, just the little and was difficult to deal with. She was fearless, but the merfolk under her command were not that powerful. She could not lose them pointlessly. If Ji Changfeng assisted them, then the formations of Cloud's Sail Mountain would be enough to suppress the two of them. However, Ji Changfeng clearly had no plans to do that. He maintained a neutral stance. Ji Changfeng was only cooperating with the merfolk of the South Sea. He was not their lackey, nor would he fall out with the Chan monastery of Devanaga over the momentary displeasure of the Merfolk Queen. Li Qingshan crossed his arms and gazed at the Merfolk Queen who was caught between a rock and a hard place. He was delighted inside. After making his choice, it was now her turn to make her choice. Chapter 875. A thin layer of cold mist radiated from Gong Yuan. The delicacies before her were immediately covered in frost, and the cup in her hand immediately shattered. Crack, crack. The frost crawled up the white jade table, producing cracks. The temperature in the hall plummeted. The coldness was oppressive. The surprised cries of mortals rang out in Three Sails City. Both the adults and children arrived on the streets, raising their heads and gazing at the mountain. As soon as the rain approached the top of the mountain, it turned into snow and hail, pitter-pattering against the glazed roof tiles. Has the Merfolk Queen finally taken action? Merfolk sure are domineering. That kid, Li Qingshan, is probably done for this time. The cultivators who had left the Philian Hall did not return to cultivate like they had said. Instead, they gazed at the mountain from a safe distance. Master, senior brother, he. Peng Jingni gazed at Yi Duanhai's back as he stood with his hands behind his back. He was worried. If Li Qingshan could not defeat the Merfolk Queen, he would definitely have to order Yu Wufeng to take action. He would basically die for sure. Yi Duanhai said nothing. As long as he's dead. Mr. Ram let out a long sigh inside before shaking his head. It was completely unreasonable, but he just felt like the kid would not die in battle. Strange, far too strange. The cold mist slowly pressed towards Li Qingshan. The sound of freezing grew closer and closer. A layer of ice seemed to cover Gong Yuan's face, beautiful yet cruel. Her eyes turned pitch black, as deep as the ocean abyss. Ji Changfeng was forced to stand up and leave as well, avoiding the coldness that grew heavier and heavier from her. He thought, she's really angered this time. If I refuse to assist her, I'll definitely be blamed in the future. He also grumbled about Li Qingshan inside, since you've already gained the upper hand, why don't you know when to stop? Why don't you give Gong Yuan a way out? If you really anger her, what good will that do? However, he also understood that at this point, even if Li Qingshan gave her a way out, Gong Yuan might not necessarily accept it. Instead, she would probably take advantage of the situation and attack. Gong Yuan was not Yi Duanhai. There was no need for her to worry about her disciple's safety. It was not Mr. Ram either. She had relied on her own strength. It could be said that her strength was the strongest on Giant Ship Island, and her faction was the strongest in the South Sea. Yi Duanhai and Mr. Ram had their reasons to retreat, but she did not. Although she did have some misgivings, it was not enough for her to put down her dignity as a ruler and submit to a lackey of the imperial court who had undergone the second heavenly tribulation. Thus, she chose to attack, forcing them step by step. If they retreated, they would immediately show their weakness, and then she could attack with all her might. If they didn't move, the cold air would slowly freeze them until they lost all ability to resist. If they were to retaliate, that would be for the best. It would allow the merfolk elders to retreat, and then she would no longer have any misgivings. At this moment, Li Qingshan moved. He didn't retreat, but advanced, stepping into the domain of ice and frost. The merfolk elders were all experienced and wise, they wanted to leave the Fylian hall. At this time, a white shadow flashed, and Little and stood in front of the main hall, staring at them expressionlessly. So fast. The merfolk elders stopped in amazement. Thinking back to the sharpness of that strike, none of them had the confidence to escape from it. Damn it, but since you dare to split up, I'll take care of you one by one. Gong Yuan's dark eyes gazed at Li Qingshan as he walked over step by step, as if she was looking at a dead man. She cultivated a cultivation method passed down by the merfolk from the ancient divine kingdom. It was called All Water to Ruin's End. Ruin's End was the legendary bottomless abyss, the place where all water gathered. Even the heavenly river would flow there in the end. In order to cultivate the All Water to Ruin's End, she had to hide in the abyss of the ocean all year round, using the merfolk's secret technique to communicate with the mysterious Ruin's End. The process of cultivation was extremely difficult. Not only did she have to endure the heavy pressure of the ocean, but her mind was also tormented. There were many times when she almost fell into despair, and her soul was completely sucked into Ruin's End. Compared to that, the physical pain was nothing. Even during the era when the merfolk flourished, there were not many people who cultivated this cultivation method, and there were even fewer who succeeded. It was precisely this kind of cultivation experience that made her cold and deep. At the same time, she was prone to hysteria. Even the merfolk were extremely afraid of her. The cold chi that she was releasing now contained the deathly cold power of Ruin's End. It was pervasive. Even Ji Changfeng could not endure it for a long time. Li Qingshan was simply courting death by walking over step by step. The black and red demonic chi that Li Qingshan released was of no use at all. Waves of cold pierced into his bones. His clothes were frozen and shredded in the blink of an eye, and the demonic armor that replaced them was still useless. The White Eagle commander's uniform was almost equivalent to a supreme-grade defensive artifact. It was impervious to blades and spears, and impervious to water and fire, but it could not even last a moment in this cold chi. The distance between them was less than 30 steps, but it was as far as the horizon. Every step he took felt like he was walking into an abyss. His exposed skin quickly turned blue and purple, and a layer of frost appeared on his demonic armor. He didn't know when it would shatter like his clothes. His battle boots were frozen as soon as they touched the ground. He needed to use force to lift them up and continue onwards. Li Qingshan should have sped up and rapidly closed the distance between him and Gong Yuan so that he could engage her in close combat, or he could just stand a little further away and launch an attack. Without a doubt, this was an opportunity for Gong Yuan to push the all-water to Ruin's End to the limit. But for some reason, he continued to walk forward step by step, neither too fast nor too slow. Don't tell me he's so confident in his strength. Even I wouldn't compete against Gong Yuan in cultivation like this, as there's no chance of victory at all. Even if the fire-devouring kings were bold enough to do this, defeat would be certain. Even if he's a supreme genius, it's impossible for him to win. The outcome has really been determined this time. Ji Changfeng secretly shook his head. He was forced to activate the formation, not because he wanted to help either side, but because he was afraid that the Philian Hall would be destroyed by Gong Yuan. Originally, there were still a few bold cultivators of the South Sea who lingered around, but they had all been forced out by the coldness now. There was no need for them to risk their lives just to watch a show. If they died to the shockwaves of the battle, that would be an undeserved disaster. Large areas of Li Qingshan's body suffered from frostbite and necrosis. His eyes turned white too, covered in a layer of frost. However, he continued to stare at Gong Yuan with his blind eyes. What he saw was no longer the noble, ice-cold merfolk queen, but a pitch-black, bottomless abyss. He could not help but think of a saying, when you stare into the abyss stares back at you. Right now, that was exactly what he felt. The abyss was ice-cold and deathly still, but it seemed to possess its own consciousness. However, what he felt was not terror or despair, but a call from the depths of his soul. It was exactly this wondrous feeling that prevented him from attacking in a hurry. When the ground became frozen soil, the tiger bones stiffened, and even the phoenix lost its endless vitality. However, the spirit turtle's mind became especially clear. The spirit turtle's method of sea suppression circulated at an unprecedented speed, radiating with divine light. What's going on? Li Qingshan was perplexed. Back when he met Gong Yuan's gaze on the whale's back, he felt very comfortable. However, when Gong Yuan struck out with her full strength, the feeling was no longer just comfortable. It was basically gratifying. There was no longer any ruthlessness on his face at all. He became extremely peaceful. What's going on? Gong Yuan also wanted to know why Li Qingshan, who should have been frozen a long time ago, could still walk towards her. Why was his expression so strange, and why did his presence give her a sense of intimacy, even instinctively wanting to get close to him? What's going on? Ji Changfeng felt like he was at a loss as well. If he only looked at their expressions, he would never believe that they were about to fight to the death. Finally, Li Qingshan stepped over the white jade table that had been frozen into shards and arrived before Gong Yuan. Their presences intertwined, and the feeling of intimacy reached the limit. If I can maintain this state, breaking through to the fifth layer of the spirit turtle will be a piece of cake. Li Qingshan sighed inside, but there was also a hint of joy. The 9 transformations of the demonic and divine was easy in the beginning, but it became more difficult the further one progressed. The wondrous power that Gong Yuan gave off had undoubtedly opened a window for the spirit turtle's cultivation. As for Gong Yuan, she just closed her eyes as if she was sensing something silently. She practiced the all-water to Ruin's End all year round. Even when she left the ocean and stood among people, she still felt like she was in the abyss of the ocean, facing the unfathomable Ruin's End. It left her extremely exhausted, which led to a severe inner demon. Being prone to hysteria was one of the external manifestations of inner demons. If she could not suppress her inner demons, not only would it be difficult for her cultivation to increase, but she might even face the danger of suffering from qi deviation. Inner demons were different from demonic nature. They were very difficult to deal with through external methods. They could only be dealt with by themselves. Many cultivators ended up ruined by this, which was also known as qi deviation. This was not as simple as falling into the demonic path and becoming a demonic cultivator. Instead, it was losing control of the mind. It was easier for demonic cultivators to suffer chi deviation than regular cultivators. When regular people lost control of their minds, they would only go mad. Cultivators possessed great power in the first place. Once their minds lost control of this power, the consequences were self-evident. But at this moment, she felt her mind become unprecedentedly peaceful. It was so comfortable that she almost wanted to moan. Whether it was Gong Yuan or Li Qingshan, neither of them knew that the mysterious ruin's end was the home of the spirit turtle, the final resting place of the spirit turtle. Because newborn spirit turtles could not survive in ruin's end, adult spirit turtles would reproduce outside ruin's end. Once the little spirit turtle matured, it would swim back to ruin's end like a river flowing back to the ocean. This cycle repeated itself. The environment of ruin's end was far too deathly still. Only spirit turtles liked it. Even water element divine beasts that were no weaker than spirit turtles would not stay there for long even if they could endure the environment there. However, to spirit turtles that pursued peace and longevity, it was the most ideal paradise. Just like how humans referred to the Mother River, they also treated ruin's end as their mother. Meanwhile, the mysterious will or laws of ruin's end also treated spirit turtles as their beloved children. This was why the two of them had such a wondrous reaction. But at this moment, Li Qingshan was in an extremely dangerous state. Although his body was tough, it was almost frozen solid. His expression remained calm as he slowly extended his hand. With every movement, the sound of ice cracking and shattering could be heard. Even his tiger bones became fragile in the extreme cold. Chapter 876. Gong Yuan shuddered and opened her eyes. Her ocean blue eyes were filled with incomparable shock. However, after glancing at Li Qingshan, it immediately turned into embarrassment and anger. It turned out that even the demonic heart in Li Qingshan's body had been frozen. Naturally, the demonic armor could not be maintained and his muscular naked body was exposed. Although she was not an innocent girl and could not bear to see a naked man, the problem was that this naked man was standing in front of her, less than a foot away. One of his hands was even on her shoulder. The corner of Li Qingshan's mouth twitched with difficulty. He could not tell if he was apologetic or proud. At the side, Ji Changfen's eyes widened. He had never seen such a strange scene in his life. The naked man stood in front of the noble and elegant mermaid queen with one hand on her shoulder and a strange smile on his face. "Take off your dirty hand." The cold air that Gong Yuan emitted became even denser. Her voice was also as cold as ice. Not only did Li Qingshan not do that, he raised his other hand and placed it on her other shoulder. He did not have much killing intent now. Instead, he was more concerned about the secrets on her body. Although Gong Yuan appeared angry, he could clearly feel that her hostility had been appeased. Moreover, he believed that she could also feel the change in him. It was a very strange feeling. However, if this continued, he was afraid that he would be frozen to death. He would not place all his hopes on his opponent. At this distance, as long as he used his hands to grab her neck and release the power of vibration, although Gong Yuan's physique was strong, it might not be comparable to the corpse king from before. He could turn the situation around in an instant. Gong Yuan frowned slightly. Her expression changed. Her breasts rose and fell. She took a deep breath and suddenly took a step back. She retracted the cold air. "I'll spare your life today." Then, he flicked his sleeves and left. When he brushed past Li Qingshan, he even glanced at him. There was no longer any hostility in his gaze. Instead, it was as if he had seen some kind of rare and precious item. At the same time, this item contained some kind of disgusting attribute, so he couldn't decide what to do with it. When they arrived at the entrance of the hall, Little An stepped aside without saying a word. Gong Yuan glared at her fiercely. Elder Blue felt strange. Although his thoughts were not meticulous, he had still watched Gong Yuan grow up. He could keenly sense that there was a subtle change in Gong Yuan's temperament. There was less melancholy and cruelty. He looked at Li Qingshan in surprise, wondering what had just happened. Only Li Qingshan and Gong Yuan were clear about the changes in their auras. Others could not understand it. The flames of the phoenix warmed his entire body, and the necrosis on Li Qingshan's body rapidly healed. His skin recovered its normal color in the blink of an eye. He looked at his hand and smiled. He never thought he would reap such an unexpected benefit this time. However, calling it an accident was not really an accident. Just like how the fire devourers possessed the divine Wudong tree, it made perfect sense for merfolk, who were born with the spirit of water, to possess items that could assist in the cultivation of spirit turtles. After all, they had both been passed down through the ancient divine kingdoms. Even though they had declined now, there were still very few that could rival their heritage. In the blink of an eye, the large Philian hall emptied out. Only Li Qingshan, Little Anne, and the dumbfounded Ji Changfeng remained. Fellow, just what did you do? Ji Changfeng hesitated for a very long time, but he still could not help but ask. I used my charm, of course. Li Qingshan smiled. Really? Ji Changfeng laughed dryly. He could not tell what startling charm Li Qingshan possessed. You might not believe me, but my charm is useless against men, but against women, you better put on some clothes first. Ji Changfeng could no longer listen to him anymore. Li Qingshan found a set of clothes from his sumaru ring and put them on. Little Anne came over to help him tidy up. Seeing this, Ji Changfeng immediately confirmed that this was not a relationship that outsiders could drive a wedge between them. With her alluring beauty, talent, and cultivation, there was no reason for her to do something like this for a man. For a moment, he almost believed in Li Qingshan's so-called charm, but he immediately dismissed this nonsensical thought. Everyone's gone anyway. It's perfect. I was just worried that I wouldn't have enough to eat by myself. Li Qingshan glanced around and nodded in great satisfaction. Everyone who disliked him had all left, so he could do as he pleased. The corner of Ji Changfeng's eye twitched. He was still in the mood to eat. However, after hesitating for a moment, he still ordered the banquet to resume. Originally, he was just trying not to offend Li Qingshan. But now, he really put Li Qingshan on the same level as him, so much so that he even felt that Li Qingshan was unfathomable. Fellow cultivator, you're really impressive today. You've really broadened my horizons. You're only at the second heavenly tribulation, yet you're already so impressive. If there's a day when you pass through the third heavenly tribulation, won't you be invincible in the world? How could that be? I'm still far from it. Being invincible in the world is not as simple as being number 1 in the world. I can defeat everyone from number 2 to number 1 in the world. But thank you for your auspicious words. I will be invincible in the world sooner or later, haha. When Ji Changfeng heard the first sentence, he thought, you brat finally know how to be humble. But when he heard the next sentence, he suddenly didn't know what to say. The world is so vast. If all the experts of the 9 provinces and 4 seas are counted, I'm afraid I can't even be ranked in the top 100. As for those who reached the so-called invincible in the world realm, there hasn't been a single one since ancient times. If Li Qingshan spoke to him like this 2 hours ago, he would definitely mock him a little. But now, facing Li Qingshan's admiring expression of, you have good taste, he could only pick up the wine cup and drink, you're indeed ambitious. This old man admires you. Let's drink. Not long after, Ji Changfeng couldn't sit still anymore. I've drunk quite a lot tonight. I'm also a little drunk, it's all right. Fellow cultivator, you can go and rest. You're welcome. Li Qingshan supported his head with one hand and held the wine cup with the other. He reclined on the main seat and leisurely enjoyed the singing and dancing below. As a result, only Li Qingshan and Little Anne remained in the large hall a while later. He simply waved his hand and dismissed the singers and dancers as well. It's really clean now, Li Qingshan communicated. He picked up the wine cup and clinked it gently with little N in his arms, drinking it all in one gulp. Why? Little N took his wine cup with one hand and placed his own into Li Qingshan's hand with the other. Li Qingshan drank it all in one gulp again. The aura that Gong Yuan gives off is extremely strange. It seems to be very beneficial to the spirit turtle transformation, and the aura of the spirit turtle seems to be beneficial to her as well. You want to dual cultivate with her? Of course. She's a queen after all. Li Qingshan pinched little N's little face. Hee, I'm just joking. She's definitely not a good person. If it weren't for the fact that she doesn't have the confidence to capture me, she definitely would have taken action and interrogated me about my secrets. Let alone the fact that the merfolk queen won't dual cultivate with a human, even if she's willing, I won't agree to it. He was lustful, but he was not so lustful that he would lose his mind and think with his lower body. Gong Yuan was different from Loth. Not only was she extremely powerful, but the organization behind her was extremely powerful as well. If Loth slept with her, then so be it, but if he got too deeply involved with Gong Yuan, there would definitely be no benefits. You overestimate yourself. Little N turned her head away in disapproval. Li Qingshan rolled his eyes. He said angrily, you damned girl. Even when you stripped naked in front of me, didn't I still manage to control myself? That's because you're a coward. Little N curled her lips. You dare say I'm a coward? Li Qingshan glared at her. I've already said that. Little N glared back at him. Forget it, forget it. I'm afraid of you. Li Qingshan pulled her into his arms helplessly and thought, originally, I had no idea what I should exchange with the merfolk, but I finally have a target now. I need to find a way to contact Ru Xian. At this moment, the banquets between the regular cultivators and the merfolk reached an end on Central and Lesser Cloud Massed Mountains. The goods the merfolk had brought from the sea had been properly arranged too. The banquets dispersed, and the sea fair officially began. Let's go. Let's go for a walk too. Li Qingshan stood up and said to Little N, walking through the antique pavilions, they were surrounded by a dazzling array of goods, but most of them were not worth much. They were just warming up right now. There would be an auction in 3 days' time. That would be the climax of the sea fair this time. As low-level cultivators still made up the vast majority, it was still extremely lively. However, wherever Li Qingshan and Little N went, the place would fall silent. The cultivators avoided them from afar, and even if they could not avoid them, they lowered their heads and maintained a respectful attitude. Only when they had traveled far away did they quietly discuss among themselves. Everything that had happened in the Philian Hall had already spread. The cultivation community of the South Sea had basically accepted the King of Savage's might. However, the one who attracted the most attention was still Little N. The sight of her descending from the sky had already become an unforgettable memory for many people. Li Qingshan and Little N looked around. Sure enough, there was nothing worth paying attention to. They arrived on the balcony outside the pavilion and leaned against the railing, gazing into the distance. The heavy rain was still pouring down, falling into the South Sea in an overwhelming manner. The waves constantly surged towards the shore, splashing against the rocks and cliffs. The raging waves beat against the shore, stirring up 1,000 piles of snow. The landscape is like a painting, and how many heroes have there been in a time? Li Qingshan said slowly. Little Li II, even if you don't recite poems, we are still friends. A familiar voice suddenly appeared in his mind. On the balcony of the lower floor, Ru Xian was leaning against the railing, gazing at the night rain. What is your relationship with Gong Yuan? Li Qingshan originally had a stomach full of questions, but when it came to the most gossipy one, it was at the tip of his tongue. Ru Xian was silent for a moment, then said, next question. What kind of cultivation method does she cultivate? Li Qingshan could hear that she was not in a good mood, so he went straight to the point. All water to ruin's end, a cultivation method passed down from the divine kingdom. The end is the legendary place where all water gathers. It is a mysterious and unpredictable world. Ru Xian introduced the all water to ruin's end. When Li Qingshan heard the two words ruin's end, he felt an incomparably intimate feeling. He then asked, "Do you know this cultivation method?" Chapter 877. This surprised Li Qingshan greatly. Originally, he had only asked casually. Probably even the merfolk elders he met today did not know about something as secret as all water to ruin's end. He never thought she would actually know about it. He became even more certain that her resemblance to Gong Yuan was not just a misconception. However, since she refused to say anything more, it was inappropriate for him to pry, so he cut to the chase. "Can you teach me?" "Yes," Ru Xian agreed without any hesitation. "However, even if I teach you, you won't be able to cultivate it." "Why?" "Cultivating this cultivation method requires you to connect with ruin's end. That's not something you can achieve just by finding a random sea abyss. According to what I know, it can only be done with the heart of the abyss, but that's a supreme treasure that only merfolk can refine. It's in Gong Yuan's hands right now. Then what if I exchange it with her? For example, I can use that virus of yours." "That's impossible. The refinement method for the heart of the abyss has already been lost. The imperial court of the merfolk only has a single one. Once it's lost, Gong Yuan's cultivation will stagnate, and I've already thought of what I want to exchange for it." The path of cultivation was crucial to any cultivator, and it was even more so to experts like Gong Yuan. Li Qingshan suspected that even if he threatened her with the fate of the entire merfolk race, she might not necessarily hand over the heart of the abyss. "That's a little troublesome." "Whatever, I'm not in a hurry anyway. I'll think about it when the time comes." His priority right now was to raise the phoenix transformation to the 4th layer. Once his strength increased, forcefully stealing it was not impossible. "Oh right, what do you want to exchange for?" Li Qingshan asked curiously. "The lost stalks of the King of Yu." What's that?" "One of the things that the King of Southern Yu wants the most. More accurately speaking, it's an incomplete stalk. That's the main objective of the ram's trip." "I still don't understand." In ancient times, a king of Yu skilled in divination attacked the Crystal Palace in an attempt to take the South Sea under the Kingdom of Yu's control. Because of a great storm, as well as the tenacious resistance of the merfolk, it finally ended in failure. Moreover, half of a set of calculation rods refined from dragon bones and dragon horns was lost in the Southern Sea. It is known as the King of Yu's remaining calculation. Refined with dragon bones and dragon horns. Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. Just by looking at the materials, he could understand the value of this calculation token. Legend has it that in the ancient times before the humankind unified the world and established the divine kingdom, the demon race once ruled the 9 regions. At that time, there were many mythological beasts such as the phoenix, Xiaji, and Qiongqi, while the dragon race was the leader of all demons. This was where the name of the dragon province came from. The minds of merfolk are unfathomable, which is why the King of Yu ordered the myriad poison ancestor to accompany him, as well as the Silver Dragon King as a form of deterrence. As a result, I hitched a ride, which makes it easier for me to bargain with Gong Yuan. Doesn't that mean you'll be in direct conflict with the King of Southern Yu's estate? Little and said you've already been suspected by that Mr. Ram. The King of Yu's remaining calculation was not of much practical use to Li Qingshan. Even if he obtained it, it would be incomplete. However, it was different to the King of Southern Yu. Right now, a war with the Green Province was imminent. Just like how it was said that the more you calculate, the less you calculate, the more you calculate, the less you calculate, the less you calculate. The use of the path of divination in a war like this could be described as crucial. It could basically determine the outcome of the war. This aspect also happened to be the greatest shortcoming of the Mist Province. The Green Province was much smaller than the Mist Province, but the system of the academy was relatively complete. The school of Yinyang specialized in this aspect, while the Mist Province was far too chaotic. Basically no one was willing to practice the path of divination that was slow to cultivate and lacking in battle prowess. As a result, the King of Southern Yu's remaining calculation was one of the items the King of Southern Yu wanted the most right now. It was not wrong at all. However, it was exactly because of this that the King of Southern Yu's estate would view anyone who tried to sabotage or obstruct them. If the saboteur just happened to run over from the Green Province, then they could basically label them as spies immediately. They would not stop until they were completely killed. At the very least, right now, Li Qingshan still did not want to directly clash with the King of Southern Yu. Otherwise, his attack on Fire Melt Mountain would be completely pointless. If the Silver Dragon King above him blasted wildly, no formations would be able to protect him. If you suspect him, then so be it. It's not like we'll ruin his plans. We'll just let him negotiate with Gong Yuan first. Though, with that woman's temperament, once you obtain the King of Southern Yu's remaining calculation, you'll have done the King of Southern Yu's estate a great service. Of course, I can't just hand over such a precious treasure so easily. It'll be the King of Southern Yu's estate's turn to beg me. Li Qingshan came to a realization. He was already relatively close to the Banyan Tree King. If he dealt with the King of Southern Yu too, just who in the Mist Province could touch him? Whether it was Savage Mountain or Fire Melt Mountain, his position would be as stable as a rock. He felt rather touched inside. Ru Xian had considered so much, still helping him out at the end of the day. Apart from devoting myself to you, there's really nothing else I can do to repay Miss Ru Xian's kindness. You're doing this for revenge. Compared to repaying kindness, I still prefer revenge. Ru Xian fell silent for a while. All she heard was the desolate night rain. Suddenly, she said, "When you're free, come with me somewhere. Even if it's a mountain of blades or a sea of fire, I won't turn it down." After Ru Xian left, Li Qingshan shared the information he had obtained with Little and thought for a while. I was originally worried that helping the merfolk take down Fire Melt Mountain and disrupt the balance between the two races would be beyond the King of Southern Yu's tolerance. Now it's safe. Li Qingshan also felt like the path ahead had become much clearer. Right when he was about to leave the building and return to his residence, a streak of white light passed through the night rain and arrived before him. Yu Wufeng said, "My king, my master invites you over. From tonight onwards, there's no need for you to call me my king anymore. After all, the path of the sword is about being unyielding and resolute. It's not good to always be under someone else's command." Li Qingshan's voice was filled with confidence. "Let's hope so." Yu Wufeng smiled. Sure enough, when Li Qingshan arrived before Yi Duanhai again, what he received was the equal treatment he had been anticipating for a long time. There were not a lot of people present. Only Yi Duanhai, the elder of cultivation methods, Li Qingshan, Little An, and Yu Wufeng were present. They negotiated amicably as equals. The actual process was extremely short. Yi Duanhai did not make any small talk at all, cutting right to the chase. One strike. Li Qingshan did not demand an exorbitant price, which allowed Yu Wufeng and the elder of cultivation methods to let out a sigh of relief. Compared to a genius disciple who could become a great sword cultivator and an arcane treasure fogbow sword, the conditions could basically be described as generous. When, where, and who? The King of Southern Yu's estate definitely won't do. There's also the royal court of the merfolk. Don't worry, it's neither of those places. It won't bring disaster to the South Sea Sword Pavilion either. You'll naturally know when the time comes. How can I trust that you'll keep your promise? Look at your heart. I also have some secrets that require Yu Wufeng to swear not to divulge. Only then can I remove the blood oath. However, there's no oath that can bind a great sword cultivator. All you can do is look at your heart, Li Qingshan said calmly. All right. Yi Duanhai did not waste any more time. See our guest off. Farewell. Li Qingshan still liked this kind of straightforwardness, but in order to obtain this straightforwardness, he really did put in quite a lot of effort. Chapter 878. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, several days had passed. Torrential rain poured down, whistling through the surroundings. It showed no signs of stopping. Gazing at the surroundings, the sky flashed with golden light, gilding the clouds. Sunlight shone on the ocean. If one looked from above, they would discover that the entire island was enveloped by a thick layer of dark clouds, while the other places were sunny, with white clouds drifting about. A mountain of clouds approached the sky above Giant Ship Island with the sea breeze. As if it had been swallowed, it merged into the thick clouds, making the rain even heavier. No matter how the sea breeze blew, the dark clouds remained unmoving. This was obviously the work of the merfolk. Merfolk did not like to leave the ocean and come to land. Only rain could make them slightly more comfortable. Regular merfolk obviously did not possess such methods, but there were many powerful merfolk led by Gong Yuan in the sea fair this time. As natural spirits of water, and they were in the moist South Sea, it was nothing for them to summon clouds and rain. Legend had it that when dragons traveled, they did not need to use any techniques. They were accompanied by clouds and rain, which was also known as dragons following clouds. At the center of the storm was a lake. A magnificent palace rose out of nowhere on the lake. The pillars, walls, and eaves were all constructed from jelly-like water. The rain fell on the palace, kicking up ripples. Enveloped in the hazy mist, it was filled with illusory beauty. At this moment, the mist above the lake parted. An old man with a goatee and goat horns appeared. He arrived on the shore under the accompaniment of a merfolk elder. There's no need to send me off. Mr. Ram clasped his hands and emerged from the merfolk palace once again. Even with his mental fortitude, he could not hide his bad luck. This was already the 5th time he had tried to persuade her in the past few days. The price he offered each time was higher than the last, already infinitely close to his bottom line. However, Gong Yuan never relented. If it was just that, then so be it. In the past few days, he had visited Ji Changfeng, Yi Duanhai, and the detestable Li Qingshan one after another. He only had a single objective, which was to pull them onto the chariot of the kingdom of Yu and make them honored guests of the king's estate. However, all of his attempts had ended in failure. This result was far too difficult to accept. It was basically one of the rare mistakes he had made in his life. Li Qingshan. Mr. Ram gritted his teeth in hatred. He'd had a premonition about this outcome since the moment he was forced to retreat in Filian Hall. With his cultivation at the second heavenly tribulation, Li Qingshan had to be a little more forceful. Only then would he be able to treat Yi Duanhai and the others as equals and carry out the transaction smoothly. How could Mr. Ram not need to display the might of Yu King Manor? He was also a second heavenly tribulation cultivator. He never thought he would be forcefully suppressed by a cultivator whose cultivation was even lower than his as soon as he arrived at the Cloud Sail sect. This invisibly created a great impact. And, the myriad poison ancestors' strange behavior had disrupted many of his plans. Originally, he planned on using the myriad poison ancestors' hostile relationship with the South Sea Sword Pavilion and Savage Mountain to threaten them to a certain extent. The king's estate did not need to take action directly. All they needed to do was support the myriad poison ancestors slightly, and Yi Duanhai and Li Qingshan would have to consider the consequences. It was still in the Filian Hall. How could the dissension between him and the myriad poison ancestor escape the eyes of those shrewd people? A single misstep resulted in a series of mistakes. Apart from the very beginning, he had come alone whenever he negotiated with Gong Yuan, so his momentum had weakened by quite a lot, let alone threatening Yi Duanhai and Li Qingshan. Sure enough, nothing good comes out of this kid's visit to the Mist Province. The potential that he and that little An have demonstrated is far too startling, so I need to get His Majesty the King of Yu to consider it and take preventive measures. If I can keep them in the Mist Province forever, the benefits won't be any less than killing 2 great cultivators of the Green Province. Though, perhaps there's no need for that. Mr. Ram gazed at the Silver Dragon King in the clouds, and a sliver of coldness flashed through his eyes. He vanished into the curtain of rain. Soon after Mr. Ram's departure, a masked figure arrived before the Merfolk Palace and bowed. "I request an audience with your Majesty." A while later, the mist parted again. Ru Xian stepped onto the surface of the lake, making her way towards the Merfolk Palace step by step. Enchanting laughter rang out from the raging surface of the lake. Beautiful figures swam about, studying her. A beautiful mermaid poked her head out of the water and asked curiously, "Hey, what's your name?" Ru Xian glanced at her and thought of a distant name, but she said nothing. She arrived in front of the Merfolk Palace and stopped for a while, studying it. She revealed a look of nostalgia, but it was hidden under the heavy mask, so no one could see it. "South Sea, I've returned." She stepped into the Merfolk Palace, and the whistling rain suddenly grew distant. A world of water unfolded before her. Many beautiful mermaids swam and played around in the water. Their tails of various colors, such as dark blue, crimson, dark green, and so on, left behind colorful trails. The trade of regular goods had already been completed. Most of them were bartering for resources that did not exist in the sea, as well as some reserves for war, such as pills, talismans, food, and so on. They finally did not have to conjure up legs to deal with those ugly humans anymore. Splitting their tails did not feel comfortable at all, and walking was very difficult too. It was nowhere near as difficult as swimming. The mermaids who had only just conjured up legs felt like they were walking on the tip of a blade when they walked on land. Once the auction ended the next day, they would be able to return home, so everyone was in a very good mood. What made them the happiest was that the queen who had always been cold seemed to have become much gentler. When she was free, she would even guide them in their cultivation. This had never happened before. Ru Xian spotted Gong Yuan on the crystal throne with a single glance. She sucked in a deep breath and adjusted her emotions. The feeling of being a bystander in the crowd was completely different from being in front of her. "You're the myriad poison ancestor's disciple?" Gong Yuan asked from above. "Yes." "How dare you? You're a coward. You're requesting an audience with the queen. Why don't you remove your mask and state your name?" The captain of the guards, Gong Kun, scolded. "Due to refining poison, my appearance has been ruined. I don't want to show it to others, so please forgive me, Your Majesty. As for my name, it's just a code name. It can be real or fake, so it's not important at all," Ru Xian said hoarsely. Gong Yuan waved her hand and dismissed Gong Kun. Demonic cultivators who refined poison would often turn themselves into something that was neither human nor ghost. Looking at her figure, she was still a woman, so it made sense for her to be reluctant to show her face. Most importantly, she definitely had the myriad poison ancestors' orders for this trip. There was no need for her to provoke that narrow-minded old man over something as small as this. "Since it's a Merfolk Sea Fair, I want to make a deal with Your Majesty," said Ru Xian. "Oh. Tell me, what do you have, and what do you want to exchange with me?" "I want to use the lives of all the fire devourers who have yet to undergo the heavenly tribulation in Fire Melt Mountain to exchange for something with Your Majesty." The hall suddenly fell silent. The mere people were all taken aback. Chapter 879. The greatest weakness of other folk was their difficulty in reproducing, which was why they valued every single clansman very much. In particular, it was even more so in this age where humanity flourished. Even the weakest of the clansmen might be able to produce powerful descendants. Fire Melt Mountain stretched for several hundred kilometers. There were only around 100,000 fire devourers, and around 100,000 of them had yet to undergo the heavenly tribulation. However, killing 100,000 fire devourers was much more difficult than killing 1 million or even 10 million mortals unless they completely destroyed Fire Melt Mountain. However, that was basically impossible. Across the entire Mist Province, only the Banyan Tree King and the King of Southern Yu's estate possessed the strength to do so. However, if they started a war like that, they would have to pay a corresponding price. Demon kings and great cultivators would definitely die. Don't tell me it's another scheme from that old dog from the King of Southern Yu's estate, trying to trick the lost stocks of the King of Yu into returning. But isn't that a little too stupid of a lie? Gong Yuan stared at Ru Xian coldly and thought to herself. I want to use the lives of all the fire devourers who have yet to undergo the heavenly tribulation in Fire Melt Mountain to exchange for something with your majesty, Ru Xian repeated calmly. Even her tone had not changed at all. All right. I'd like to hear what you have to say, Gong Yuan said with the mindset of, I'd rather believe it than not. The security of Fire Melt Mountain is tight, so normally speaking, you have to kill the fire-devouring kings and breach Fire Melt Mountain before you can massacre fire devourers on a large scale. However, even great cultivators can't achieve something like that. If you have something to say, just say it. Stop beating around the bush, Gong Yuan said impatiently. All right. I've studied medicine for many years, and I've come up with an idea. Do you know about plagues, Your Majesty? Ru Xian asked. Fire devourers feed on fire. They're immune to all diseases, so how can they be infected by plagues? Is this your idea? Gong Yuan asked. Regular plagues obviously won't work. Please take a look at this, Your Majesty. Ru Xian fished out a grayish-white stone from her sumaru ring. The water surged and swept the stone over to Gong Yuan. She glanced at it and said, This is just a regular stone. What are you trying to pull? Don't tell me Your Majesty doesn't find the shape of this stone rather familiar? Originally, Gong Yuan had only used her soul sense to investigate whether there was anything strange in the rock or not. Only with Ru Xian's reminder did she take a closer look and become slightly surprised. This seems like the heart of a fire devourer. The heart of a fire devourer was equivalent to the demon core of a demon. However, demon cores had to be condensed after birth, while the heart was innately present. It was the source of power for fire devourers. However, it should be emitting a crimson glow and containing a dense amount of fire spiritual energy. That's right. This is the result of being infected with the plague. The hearts of fire devourers will turn into lifeless rock. I've already tested it on many fire devourers. This plague is very contagious, and it has a certain degree of latency. Once it breaks out, death is certain. Stone heart, Ru Xian said. Do you think I'll believe you just because you took out a heart carved out of a random rock and boasted about it? Gong Yuan closed her hand gently, and the stone heart turned to dust. She waved her hand. See off the guest. Ru Xian bowed and actually said nothing more, turning around and leaving. Gong Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly. Speaking of which, her back seemed rather familiar, but she could not recall where she had seen it before. Ru Xian was about to make her way out of the hall when Gong Yuan's voice rang out from behind, Stop! What other orders do you have, Your Majesty? Ru Xian seemed to be expecting this a long time ago, so she turned around gently. Who are you exactly? The sense of familiarity from the way she turned around intensified. Gong Yuan had a vague feeling that there was a mysterious connection between her and this mysterious visitor, as if they were connected by an invisible thread. At her realm of cultivation, intuition was no longer just intuition. It was almost like divination and prophecy. Your Majesty shouldn't be concerned about my identity, but our deal, Ru Xian reminded her. You said you study the path of medicine, but I don't recall the myriad poison cult having any path of medicine. Even across the entire Mist Province, there aren't a lot of disciples of the School of Medicine. If what you said is true, then you've gone to so much effort to refine a plague that targets fire devourers just to make a deal with me? Gong Yuan doubted. Why not? Ru Xen answered with a question. Gong Yuan curled her right index finger, and the flowing water before Ru Xen suddenly condensed into a blade of ice. It was thin and transparent, almost invisible. It was even sharper than a blade. With Ru Xen's cultivation that had only recently undergone the second heavenly tribulation, she was unable to respond at all. She only felt a sliver of coldness sweep across her face, and the mask silently split into two. Seeing her face clearly, Gong Yuan, who had always been cold and dignified, revealed a stunned expression of disbelief. She cried out involuntarily, "Little sister." However, she immediately returned to her senses. "No, that's impossible. Who are you exactly?" Although her appearance was roughly similar, there were still some differences. However, the sense of familiarity from that moment was far too intense, overlapping with the image in her memories, which was why it created a false impression. Her little sister's expression had never been so cold. Even when she left the South Sea, she was as gentle as before. "Your little sister is already dead, so of course she can't stand before you again." Ru Xian's face seemed like it was carved from white jade. Apart from the movement of her lips, she did not reveal any expression at all. Her voice was so calm that it seemed like she was stating a fact that had nothing to do with her. "So it's you, you wretched child," Gong Yuan said sternly. Right now, what she felt was no longer just familiarity, but a deep connection of blood. The distant past surged through her, and her heart was filled with mixed feelings. Did she regret it? Did she feel guilty? For a moment, she was unable to describe what she felt. "It's me, you wretched child. I didn't think your majesty would still remember me. I'm still alive. You must be very disappointed, your majesty. What do you think? After seeing my face, have you become a little more interested in our deal?" Ru Xan asked. "The final outcome isn't what I want to see either. Originally, I thought they could leave the Mist Province. Forget it. Thousands of clansmen died at the hands of the fire devourers. Even if she's my younger sister, she's just one of them. Since I'm a queen, I can't be selfish. Whether you're telling the truth or not, stay behind. I'll avenge you." Gong Yuan suppressed her various emotions and recovered her composure as a merfolk queen. If what she said was true, then she had to be in her hands. She would be the trump card for defeating the fire devourers. Perhaps she could even end the war completely. "Unfortunately, I don't need you to avenge me. If I need to rely on someone's strength, that person won't be you. I'm not asking you. This is an order." "Then that's even more of a pity. I'm not a merfolk, so I don't have to follow the merfolk queen's orders. If your majesty isn't willing to carry out the deal, then I'll be leaving." With that, Ru Xian turned around and left. "That's not up to you." Gong Yuan's eyes turned cold, and she clenched her right hand. The water around Ru Xian immediately froze into a prison of ice. She finally sneered. There was a flash of green light, and with a boom, the prison of ice shattered. The entire palace shook. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.